1, 2, 3, 4.
Christopher Media. Let's make some noise.
Rock, 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 rock and roll.
Rock and Roll High School is an album and a movie. Vince Van Patten is crazy about PJ Souls, but she wants to live a rock and roll fantasy with her favorite group, the Ramones.
Yeah, to the wall.
The new principal tries to stop the music, but the kids rock and wreck the school. Rock and Roll High School, the school where the students rule. Your school could be next. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested.
Class is now in session. Welcome to the projection booth. I am Professor Mike White. Joining me is Dean Rob St. Mary.
I love concerts, but who are the Ramones?
Also joining us this week is Filmwax Radio's Adam Schartoff.
Hey guys, thanks for inviting me onto the podcast. I'm very excited to be here. I'm calling all the way from Idaho, where it's raining cats and dogs.
Yes! This week we are looking at the 1979 film from director Allan Arkush, Rock and Roll High School. The film tells the tale of Riff Randall, a superfan of the Ramones who has penned a new song for them to sing. It also tells the tale of Kate Rambeau, a nebbish teen looking for love at the screwball Vince Lombardi High. The pair run afoul of the school principal, Evelyn Togar, and all hell eventually breaks loose. Adam, as our guest, when was the first time you saw Rock and Roll High School, and what did you think, sir?
The first time I saw Rock and Roll High School was in the mid-'80s, and I was living in Boston. And I was, quote-unquote, attending college, which for the most part consisted of me going to the Harvard Square Cinema and seeing movies there, which was their local repertory theater over there. They would pair lots of old movies together, and that's the first time I saw Rock and Roll High School. So it had to be like somewhere around 84, 85, the latest. And even though I hail from the same town as the Ramones, Forest Hills, Queens, I was not a fan of theirs going into that movie the first time, and so I really wasn't that familiar with them, but have since, of course, become an enormous fan.
I think I saw this on video when I was working at Thomas Video, and it was just one of those, let's watch all the films in this Roger Corman series. So it was one of those, of course, that was produced by Corman, not directed, as we know. And the whole Corman school, all those great folks that went through there, and some of which worked on this film and went on to become pretty well-known directors in their own right, such as Joe Dante. So it was one of those films that I picked up. And also, I knew the Ramones, wasn't a huge fan, much more of a fan now than I was back then when I saw it.
I have no idea when I first saw this film. It always just seemed to be kind of there. Obviously, I wouldn't have seen it when I was 9 years old, or no, I guess it would have been 7 years old when it first came out. It took me a few years to catch up with it, and I swear I remember seeing more promos on MTV than anything, like when MTV was first around, especially that bit of Dick Miller saying, they're ugly, ugly, ugly people. And when it finally came time for me to track this thing down, I couldn't find it on VHS. I ended up having to order a bootleg of it, which came from a Japanese Laserdisc. At one point in time, it was easier to get a bootleg VHS copy of a Japanese Laserdisc than it was to actually own this thing on VHS itself. And this was probably also when maybe the movie wasn't necessarily a sell-through title, when it was still a for rental only kind of thing. So it was probably a lot cheaper at the time too. But now it is available, beautiful Blu-ray set, and with all kinds of extras on here, multiple audio commentaries. It's really kind of given this lavish treatment. I'm really glad that this movie has kind of come back into the limelight, and definitely a fan of the Ramones now. Really wasn't that much into them when I was kind of going through those formative punk rock years. Again, they just seemed to always kind of be there, and then when they finally kind of broke into my mainstream, it was much more of like, they're the guys that sing the Pet Sematary song. So there was that time where I wasn't necessarily that familiar with the Ramones, but I'm glad that they have this film to kind of harken back to. It is fantastic work. So let's talk a little bit more about the plot. I talked a little bit about it up front. But, there's a lot of stuff going on in this movie. It's kind of kind of screwball.
You think? I think the reason why both the Ramones as a band and in this movie has stood up is just because there's such a sense of fun to both and life and energy, and they lack cynicism. It's not something I identified back when I originally saw the film, but after watching Rock and Roll High School probably a good half dozen times in the last few months, I've really come around, I have to say.
I think another reason for it is that even if you can't place a half dozen names of these type of films from 20 years earlier from the 50s, it really does feel to me like the guys that made this definitely knew that they were referencing stuff that came out cheap, exploitation, high school movies from the 50s, and just pulling it forward and putting their own spin on it. So there's this level of fun that comes with it when you know that it's like, oh, well, of course, there's the jock and there's the geek and there's all these different levels of, high school characters that we get in those films from the 50s and in the early 60s. That seems to be the heyday of that youth culture film.
Well, we talked last week about Cruel Story of Youth and that whole idea of the high school film, and when you're in high school, just how your emotions are, so keyed up, and it just means so much. And you take a film like Rock and Roll High School and even compare it to something that came out a few years earlier, like Carrie, and it's like, again, everybody is just so emotional, and there's just so much stuff going on, and the stakes are so high. Whereas in Rock and Roll High School, it's not treated that way at all. Like, you could have played up this bizarre love triangle thing between Kate Rambeau, Riff Randall, and then the Vince Van Patten character. Just like, he wants PJ Souls, he wants Riff Randall, and Kate Rambeau, Dey Young, wants him. And meanwhile, PJ Souls, she just wants Joey Ramone. And it's just, you could have really had these tear-felt moments of melodrama and all this kind of stuff. And there's one point where it kind of, push comes to shove a little bit. And I think it's kind of diffused within 2 lines of dialogue. And it's like, okay, great. So we don't have that typical melodrama kind of stuff going on in this movie. It is fun. There's just this sense of fun. And it is very much like this whole idea of us versus them, the kids versus the principal. And even within the kids versus the principal, you still have Confederates amongst the teachers and everything. So it's not even that much of the stakes being so high where it's the kids just butting up against all of the faculty. You just have the one bad guy, Evelyn Togar, and her 2 minions, Hansel and Gretel, and that's it. And otherwise, there aren't a whole lot of bad people in this movie, and it's much more about just enjoying yourself.
And in fact, there's references at the very beginning, in the first opening scenes, about how there's been a line of principals at the school. None can survive because they're all so conservative, and there's a sense of rebelliousness and again, life in these students that can't be suppressed, and in that way, the movie also reminds me of a later film, Footloose, in terms of the establishment trying to squelch that sense of life and youthfulness and music and dance and all that. There's a similarity I thought I caught.
I love that everybody loves the Ramones in this too. No matter what strata of person you are in the high school, in Rock and Roll High School, Vince Lombardi High, you're into the Ramones. And even, Mr. McGoober, or what do they call him? They totally butcher Paul Bartel's Mr. McGree's name.
We'll come and pay you, Mr. McGloob, a visit.
That's the thing I like about Bartel in here. And as you know from the show, a huge Paul Bartel fan. We've done 2 of his films on the show. We've done Eating Raoul and also Death Race 2000. And I like his character in here because he kind of starts out as, well, you kids really should listen to classical music. And he's got this whole thing about Beethoven's Fifth in the opening. And then you have that great set piece, which I love, is the whole rat experiment, where Togar's like, look, this is what happens when you play the music at the rat. It starts doing all this stuff, and it's so ridiculous, and you can't take it serious. That's what makes it funny, is that he eventually comes around to become a fan of the music and stands up for the kids and goes, no, this is just a continuum of art. This is not, there's nothing bad or corrupting in this. It's not worse than anything else that's out there. It's just another form of expression. So, and I think it's funny when he shows up at the concert and he's like, kind of like obviously not dressed appropriately, quote unquote, for the event. And the guy who's taking his ticket says, "Oh, Montevanti's down the block." And like a lot of people wouldn't get that, but I often go through record bins looking for stuff, and there's a lot of Montevanti records out there, and it's basically sort of like classical music. It's like all these like string albums. So I just thought that was kind of funny as a little joke, which obviously would have been big during that era. People would have known what that joke means.
I think that's actually Arkush taking the tickets at that point, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, it's his little director cameo.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah, there's a lot of Montevanti and there's a lot of Best of Bread. That always seemed to be the one I found at every used record store ever.
Especially at like the thrift stores. You go to like the Salvation Army or something, you'll find like, stacks and stacks of Montevanti records that nobody wants. Speaking
of records, there's an ongoing reference or themes to records and record collections later in the film. There's actually record burning scene, of course, but PJ Soles' character has quite a collection that she reveres, and I believe actually I was listening to the audio commentary, Allan Arkush's audio commentary about it, and those were his records. That was the records you see in her bedroom and later on at the school being burned were from his collection, and they were quite classic albums. I mean, some of them were only 10, 20 years old at the most back then when the movie came out, but if that old. But they were really, there was a real, beyond fetish, there was a real passion and love for rock music and records.
Yeah, I was so glad to see some of those that show up, especially that Sticky Fingers album in there. And it still, even all these years later, it still hurts a little when I see that big pile of burning records.
Oh yeah, and if you look, if during that whole fantasy sequence, where she's in her bedroom dreaming about Joey and the other Ramones, there you could see her records on the floor, and I think I caught one Talking Heads album in there, more songs about buildings and food. I think that's what that album's called, if I'm not mistaken.
The music in here is pretty incredible, too. I mean, just beyond the Ramones, I'm writing down who has needle drops in this film. And if you tried to do this film today, it would, like, the soundtrack alone would be more than the budget of this thing. I mean, you have, the Velvet Underground rock and roll. You have Nick Lowe in here. There's just so many songs. And it's just kind of incredible that they were able to get all of that. Devo, Alice Cooper, and then when they start trashing the school at the end, before obviously the Ramones play Rock and Roll High School to end the film, you get our boys here from downriver, the MC5 with High School. So it's just an amazing call to all of these various bands and songs that they were able to use. And like I said, if you try to do it today, it'd be more than the budget for this film.
And don't forget, you got Smoking in the Boys' Room in there, too.
Another Detroit act. Well, actually, Ann Arbor, Brownsville Station.
Yeah, one of the things that always comes up in conversation about Rock and Roll High School is the other bands that might have been in the film. So we might as well just kind of address that. And we'll hear about that a little bit more with some of the interviews later on. But I can't picture the movie being the same without the Ramones. And the Ramones just add this level of strangeness to it. I mean, these four guys with these kind of bad haircuts who all dress the same. They're kind of ugly people, especially Joey. I mean, no offense to Ramones fans or Joey Ramone, but the scene of him singing to PJ Soles, her lighting up a joint, which is amazing, her lighting up a joint and having this fantasy. I mean, people always bring up, oh, well, it might have been Cheap Trick, but then they got really popular. And it's like, okay, I can see a young woman having a fantasy about that lead singer from Cheap Trick. Yeah, no problem. But to make it Joey Ramone just makes it so bizarre, and I love it. It works so great, it just runs counter to everything that you might think. And then, Dee Dee in the shower and everything, and just he's always making these goofy fucking faces, and Johnny with that horrible haircut. I mean, just everything works so well, that it just wouldn't have worked with any other band, I think.
The other angle that it works on, and this, once again, like I said, and this is not a fault or idea of the filmmaker, I don't believe, is the fact that the Ramones look meets that 1950s greaser look I was talking about. Plays into that 1950s like Teenage Rebellion movie. So you've got them in jeans and leather jackets and T-shirts, which is how they used to dress on stage. That was their look. Like I said, it just adds this extra level, which the guys in Cheap Trick at the time were a little bit more flashy. They would have been more late 70s than looking like late 50s.
Yeah, just to build on what Rob was talking about, I did some reading up, and I know that the Ramones definitely were very influenced by the 50s musicians and bands, that they were really big fans of like Eddie Cochran and Buddy Holly, early Beatles, all that stuff, Elvis, all that stuff. So it definitely had an influence all around. And I don't even think they consider themselves punks or punk musicians. I don't know if that term was even really used initially, or if that was something that the rock critics ended up coming up with and they just took it on over time. I'm not sure, but they were definitely influenced by 50s music. Oh, and another thing I wanted to also add while I'm at it, Mike, you mentioned the fact that these guys weren't always the best looking, especially Joey. He was kind of a challenged, let's say. His looks were a bit challenged. He had, this bad haircut, bad teeth, no chin, bad eyesight, all this stuff. But, in a way, this endeared him and the rest of the boys to us. We could identify with them. They were, they looked like us, and also the fact that they were so new on the set, they were awkward, they were uncomfortable, clearly nervous, perhaps, and all these things made them so accessible and all the more sort of charming to me anyway.
You're right, Rob. That whole 50s aesthetic they're definitely going for. And then even before, they were in this movie, they were making a lot of references, both through, the songs that they would cover, but then also through some of the titles and the lyrics. They would make references to some of these films that Roger Corman was making in the 50s, or, prior to that, some of the other films. So it all kind of feeds itself. And I don't see like a Cheap Trick necessarily doing that. Or I had heard once that they were talking about Van Halen at a point, and even Devo at a point. Now, a Devo movie I could get behind, and again, it would have that really strange level, like especially Riff Randall, if she was just like, oh, and Mark, I love the way his glasses make him look, and all this kind of stuff. And so that would have been surreal, but in a different way. And I think that aesthetic that you guys were talking about, that 50s aesthetic, works because of this being this juvenile delinquent film. Those squarely set in the late 70s. One of the things that I love the most about this movie is that custom van. Oh my God. I mean, nothing says 70s to me like an amazing custom van. And I know there are still people out there, like these vanatics, they call themselves, who still do all this customization, the special windows, the putting in the water beds and the shag carpet, all this kind of stuff. They might have updated a little bit since then, but just, it was glorious seeing this kind of stuff.
With the painting on the side, and of course the stick, if the van's are rocking, don't come a knocking.
When I was in high school, we were just really fascinated by this book. We would go in at lunchtime and into the library and pick up different books, and one of them was the Do-It-Yourself Custom Van book from 1977. So that was just filled with pictures of van modifications, and they would give different names to some of the different parts. So like, there were these kind of like parallelogram windows, and those would be called sharks. And then if you had multiples of those, they would be called progressive sharks. So it's just like, we would always talk about the custom van book. Whenever we would see a custom van, it was just always kind of this, hey, look check it out. And it was great because it told you how to customize your van and what you would need and all this kind of stuff. And they would always put things in terms of how long it would take to do, and they would say a weekend, a long weekend as long as there's no game on.
If you're not participating in the weed, all these things can really slow you down, as you know.
Like I said before, I love that drug use is kind of just there in this film, and I was very surprised when Riff lit up, but I was great with it. Nowadays, she would be the one, castigated for her evil drug use.
Not only that, but there's the scene, obviously, with Clint Howard's character, where they're in the van, and he's like, "You need a drink." And the whole idea of underage drinking in film, when we were growing up, was always, like you had said, it showed that the character had these flaws and had to drink. It wasn't just in the background like, hey, have a drink, take the edge off. The characters in here are much older. They're much, or they're treated more like regular adults as opposed to teenagers in the way that sort of teenagers were treated in film, at least when I was growing up in the 90s.
Yeah, it's nice that we haven't had the Reagan era to really, criminalize any kind of adult behavior in kids.
I wouldn't be surprised if Cameron Crowe was a fan of Rock and Roll High School because of the van and the similar types of references. I mean, for all I know, he may have borrowed a few, if you remember Spicoli and coming out of the van and all the pot smoking and ordering a pizza in the classroom. All those things are very reminiscent of Rock and Roll High School with Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
The vans, the attitudes, the free love, the great quotable lines. There were so many amazing lines in this film. You both kind of gave a couple of examples at the top of the show, and just it really never fails with some of these things. I mean, yes, some of them are complete groaners, but I really think that they know that. It's not like they're trying to pass off some of this pure cheese as being, high literature or anything.
Oh, it totally knows what it is, and it also knows what it is in terms of its characters. Like, the characters are so well established that you don't even need to have them open their mouths. Like, that was one of the things that I wrote down about Mary Woronov's character as the principal, in that, she has her hair back and she's dressed in drab clothes and very stern, in terms of her posture. So it's like the minute you see her, that this is a person who wants to be taken seriously, and she's the school marm kind of character. And then the Paul Bartel character of the music teacher, he is much more like, he's almost like a college professor. He's got like the beard, which Bartel always had, but kind of the guy who wears the suit coat with the patches on the elbows and stuff like that. Yeah, like all the characters are so sort of well sketched out in terms of their look, in terms of their design, I guess, is what you could say, that once they get together in the scene, sort of how they're going to play off each other.
Talk about another great character, Eagle Bauer, just the way that his costumes, I mean, he looks like a used car salesman and he acts like a used car salesman. That whole basically selling, the Kate Rambeau experience to the Vince Van Patten character, and just, the whole, like...
I want to get laid before I'm 30. Are you a virgin? Do you mean, technically? You've come to the right place. Eagle Bauer Enterprises is a name that stands for quality. Wait, I'm going to get you a date with the most primo lady in this school, Kate Rambeau. Johnny, why don't you tell Tom how happy he'll be with Kate?
Right you are, Mr. Bauer. Kate Rambeau, age 17, attends Vince Lombardi High, where she majors in nuclear physics. This perky gal on the go's hobbies include splitting protons and checkers. Included in your night to remember is a matched set of Travelways luggage. That's Travelways luggage, the first name in travel for over 5 years. And now back to you, Mr. E.
There she is, Tom.
It doesn't get any better than that for me. And I love, that he's this high schooler who's already starting to lose his hair. I mean, nobody's really playing of age at all in this film. Again, they just kind of don't care. And that's absolutely fine with me. Nobody looks like they're actually in high school. And I don't care. That's fine. You can be a 25-year-old high school student. It, again, kind of harkens back to those 50s delinquent films where you had people that were 30 and 40 years old playing high school students. It's like, all right, I buy it. Go with it.
But then again, let's move 10 years to the future to a film that I used to watch quite a bit and liked as a kid, and I know you're not a fan, is Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Matthew Broderick was almost 30 when he played Ferris Bueller. Like, that's almost like going back to that idea where, yes, we know you're not a teenager, but you have to play one. Like, you got to act like one. You can't act like an adult that happens to be in high school.
Of course, I was very happy to see Screamin' Steve in this film, played by the real Don Steele, who is, one of our kind of unofficial mascots here. That's right. And lands us again into a series of films that we've done. I think it was an unconscious move on our part, but almost like an unofficial series at a look at the films starring real Don Steele. So Death Race 2000, Eating Raoul, Gremlins, this. Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park. There's that. And then, to be honest, I'd love to do Grand Theft Auto at some point. So I guess maybe at some point we will actually run down all the films of the real Don Steele. The only real Don Steele completist in the podcasting world. That's right. Yeah, we're going to give that guy, old school radio guy, his due. Too bad he's dead and we can't talk to him.
I just loved all these bits in Rock and Roll High School. Like Eagle Bauer's office is a great example. It's a bathroom stall, but it's like this enormous office. So it's a nice little visual trick, or bit, which is just one of many in the movie. It's almost as though they wrote the film story around a series of bits, whether it's the paper airplane that, goes across the entire school campus right into Paul Bartel's classroom and goes right into his ear, which is a great bit, to, the effects of rock and roll on mice, which is another great bit. They're kind of corny, but it goes back to this sweetness and sincerity in the movie, which I just really ended up really loving. Of all the people that we managed to get for the show, and again, you'll hear some interviews coming up in just a little bit here, we were unable to get Marky Ramone, the only surviving member of the Ramones who was in the film. And Marky had some great stories about the making of Rock and Roll High School in his recent autobiography, which was called Punk Rock Blitzkrieg, My Life as a Ramone, which I listened to on audio, and it was pretty great. Other than the guy who narrated it didn't necessarily know some of the pronunciations of names that well, so every once in a while he would kind of butcher some stuff, but I'm sure I do the same thing sitting here on this podcast. I'm sure that there are a lot of foreign names that I butcher, but these were not necessarily that foreign of names. So anyway, some of the stories that he had to tell about the film were just amazing, especially, it's no secret that Dee Dee Ramone, pretty hardcore drug user, and that fence that you see around Vince Lombardi High, at times you would see in real life there would be fans outside of the fence, and they would just start chucking stuff over the fence for Dee Dee, and it was just random pills and drugs, and he would go along and pick them up, put them in his pocket, and then later on he'd just start popping stuff, having no idea what it was. Maybe a little bit of an idea, like, I'm sure at some point in your drug use, like a yellow pill is going to be this and a green will do that or whatever. But for the most part, he would just kind of take out a couple things, put it in his mouth, and off he would go and enjoy himself for the rest of the afternoon or evening or whatever it was. So yeah, pretty good stuff. And this is Marky, who's still alive, who wrote the book? Marky wrote this after the rest of them were gone. So he actually talks about Joey's funeral in there, and he talks about Johnny's passing, and I think Dee Dee went before either of those guys, if memory serves. But yeah, he talks about Joey's condition and all this kind of stuff. And it is fascinating, though, too, to hear about Joey's other condition, his OCD, and just how that kind of affected the band, and the band dynamic was really kind of twisted, but I'm sure it's the same way that you get any four guys, throw them in a van and put them on a stressful tour schedule. Everybody's going to have their own kind of quirks, but it sounds like they were just kind of effed up, especially like Johnny and Joey didn't talk to each other for a lot of years, and they would use other people as intermediaries, even though it's like Johnny's in the front of the band and Joey's in the back, and never the twain shall meet.
I know that they didn't get all that well. I know that there was a clash of personalities because you have someone like Dee Dee who, as you were saying, was such a sort of a loose cannon in a way. I mean, just anyone who's willing to do that kind of stuff. And I know that Johnny Ramone was one of the first that I can remember of a punker who was a conservative Republican. Like, he was like, thought Ronald Reagan was great and all of this stuff. So that was kind of a shocker, because to me, I always thought that the punks were much more, or at least the people who were labeled with that were much more, liberal and free spirited. But he was a very conservative guy. I think he used to go to church and all that stuff. So it kind of runs counter to what you expect, when you talk about rock and roll. But it was just kind of fascinating. And I like that I had an opportunity at one point to talk to Danny Fields, Danny Fields, there's a documentary about him out recently. I can't remember the title of it, but about his time. And he was the guy who signed the MC5 and the Stooges to Elektra and did a bunch of different things. And he was their manager for a while, and probably during this period. And I remember Danny Fields telling me stories about how, like these guys didn't get along, but what brought them together was they were like the only four guys in that section of New York that liked the Stooges. Like, they all liked the Stooges for some reason. I'm not talking about the Three Stooges. I'm talking about Iggy Pop. And they liked the Funhouse record and all of that stuff. And he said everybody hated that stuff, but these guys somehow liked it, and that brought them together somehow.
I think the documentary is called Danny Says.
Yeah, that's it.
Anybody's looking for it. Were any of the Ramones, were any of them brothers or related? I know that most of them were not, but were any of them related?
No, none of them.
Not at all. And that's the thing that was also funny, is I remember reading the book, the Legs McNeil book, Please Kill Me. And there's a bunch of stuff, obviously, about the Ramones. And I think it was David Byrne who said that the Ramones had more of an image and a stage management than anybody in any other band at the time, because they created that whole look, like we talked about, the T-shirts and the black leather jackets, and all taking, Johnny Ramone and all that, and all having the same last name, and sort of developing this whole kind of persona, this whole idea, which he's like, the other bands at the time weren't doing that kind of thing. They didn't create this sort of like stage show and idea to go kind of along with it.
Yeah, I think the closest you're going to get is kind of going back to Devo with their, matching outfits and all this kind of stuff. And it's always hilarious to me, Adam, you had mentioned the whole idea of like people not calling themselves punk at the time. And it was such a diverse group of musicians. If you go back and just kind of, take a cross section of, a weekend at CBGB's or however long, a month there, just so many diverse groups, looking at somebody like, Blondie versus the Talking Heads versus, I don't know, the Dead Boys, just so different in their approach to things and where they would go with their music and everything. And it didn't feel like this, unified movement, which is what I really like about, punk rock, new wave of the day, is that everything was so different. Like, even if you go through, some of the British bands, like, Susie and the Banshees versus Sex Pistols, totally different approach to everything, but yet they're still lumped in as, being punk rock. And again, kind of, go 10 years into the future and compare a Public Image Limited to what Susie was still doing. And again, so different with what this was. And it's amusing to me to realize that they were all under the same umbrella, even though they were completely different.
Well, I think one thing they did share, and that was a rejection of corporate rock, of a rejection of slick rock, The
thing really was a backlash against the big bloated arena rock bands and the prog rock bands of the day. I mean, Emerson, Lake and Palmer and all of that stuff. And then also, I mean, in my research for the book that I've been doing, which does cover the Detroit punk scene, a lot of people also said like singer-songwriters were big in the early and mid-'70s. I mean, the Jim Croce's and Dan Fogelberg's and James Taylor and all that stuff. And they were just like, God, it's like that stuff was putting us to sleep. And then you had these bands that were playing, a million notes a song that went on for 15 minutes. And it was like, no, it's like, we don't want either of those. We want to strip everything back to its original idea. And then, like you were saying, this sort of anti-corporate thing, but the idea of just do it yourself, because no label's going to come and sign you. Just go do it yourself. Put out your own records, put out your own magazines, put out your own thing. And I think, if anything, that's really what they shared together in spirit, was this rejection of what was in the popular culture and the willingness to do it themselves when no one else was willing to step up and give them the money to do it. They didn't wait for permission. They went and did it themselves.
So you mentioned the documentary about Danny Fields. Another documentary that we should bring up is, we talked a few months ago with the filmmaker behind the That Guy Dick Miller documentary, and I would really recommend folks go back and check that out, because Dick Miller, obviously a Roger Corman staple, just like Mary Woronov, just like Paul Bartel. So he makes just a small appearance in here. You know, I think he comes back again in another movie we'll talk about as Officer Paisley. He was always playing this Walter Paisley character. So definitely go back and check that out. And he does have, for me, one of the best lines of Rock and Roll High School.
And also, if you're a Ramones fan, I would say End of the Century is also a good documentary on them, so you should see that.
I actually was flatmates with the guy who co-directed End of the Century when I was at Slam Dance years ago. Then I felt bad because I actually gave End of the Century not that good of a review. So I'm like, oh shit, I hope he never read my review.
What are the chances he'll be listening to this?
Oh, probably very, very slim. Sorry, Mike Gramaglia. All right, we are going to take a break, and we're going to play a few words from our sponsors, followed by our interviews. This week we have a ton of interviews, and they're going to be cut together in kind of a rock and roll montage. You know, I know the kids like that. So in alphabetical order, and not necessarily the order of how these are going to be played, you're going to hear from director Allan Arkush, cinematographer Dean Cundey, co-writer Russ Dvonch, actor Clint Howard, writer Joseph McBride, actress PJ Soles, co-writer Richard Whitley, actress Mary Woronov, and actress Dey Young.
Let me ask you a question. Are you getting enough? I bet you'd love more, right? Well, AdamandEve.com wants to give you more with 10 free gifts. First, you'll get a sexy surprise for her. Second, a specially selected toy for him. And third, a little something we know you'll both enjoy. Plus, you'll get 6 full-length adult movies on DVD. And number 10, free shipping on your entire order. So what do you have to do to get your 10 free gifts? It's not hard. Just go to AdamandEve.com and select any one item. It could be an adventurous new toy, sexy piece of lingerie, or anything you desire. Just enter offer code BOOTH at checkout, and you'll get all 10 free gifts. Go check out AdamandEve.com today. Select one item and get 10 free gifts, including free shipping, when you enter offer code BOOTH. That's BOOTH at AdamandEve.com.
Hi, Dave Nelson, host of the Comedy A Go-Go podcast, whose previous guests include...
Hey, this is Carlos Alazraki, James Garcia from Reno 911.
Hey, this is Graham Ellis. Hey, this is Kyle Kinane.
Hi, this is Jackie Cation.
This is TJ Miller.
Hey, this is Nick Vatterott.
So if you fancy yourself a comedy fan, maybe even a comedy nerd, check out the podcast at www.comedya-go-go.com or on iTunes under Comedy A Go-Go. And remember...
Yeah, it's a go-go, all right? It's not a went, all right? It is current, all right? Listen to me on the podcast. I feel like that's what I write.
All right, I'm here with Bill Byforce and Mr. Chris to tell you a little bit about Outside the Cinema.
All right, Reverend Scott, take us to church.
What can we expect to find from a typical show?
2 hours of just random blabber.
Is there anyone's coattails you rode in on to popularity?
I'm the guy that f***ing burns the coattails and then pisses on them.
You review all these exploitation, horror, comedy, cult, and often all-around terrible movies. You must have a strong driving force that keeps you going.
Ego.
I don't know if I've heard you say that before.
Yeah, I've been saying that for a while.
Really?
I have been saying that for a while. Also, I'm high on smack.
Well, it's definitely working for you guys. People are coming out in droves to support you on iTunes.
We just the other day got a 1-star review on iTunes.
Well, that is one star too many. Let me tell you, the worst piece of shit I've ever heard.
This has been great, guys.
Thanks, Scott. That was good. Oh, he's got you crying over there.
I'm good for the rest of the year.
Nice.
That was too much.
Rock and Roll High School, the school where the students rule. The new principal hates the students, but the kids take over and rock the roof off the school. Dig out the sounds of Paul McCartney and Wings. Fleetwood Mac, Devo, Nick Lowe, Chuck Berry, Tom Rundgren, Vince Fabric, Velvet Underground, Brownsville Station, MC5, Eno, Paley Brothers, Eddie and the Hot Rod, Alice Cooper, and starring the Ramones. Rock and Roll High School. Rated PG, parental guidance suggested.
Screenwriter Joseph McBride.
I had been writing screenplays since 1966, starting in Madison, Wisconsin, and I was self-taught. Back then there weren't any books or classes that I could take, so I was teaching myself to write scripts, and so it took me 10 years to sell a script. And when I finally sold one, it was to Roger Corman. It was a script of kind of a satire of Dick Clark's American Bandstand, so we would have been ahead of Hairspray and the film The Idolmaker if we had done this. And Dick Clark heard about it and put the thumbs down on the project, unfortunately. But then I got hired to do a couple more scripts for Roger, one of which was filmed, Rock and Roll High School, and I was one of the writers on that film. And I was hired because of the Dick Clark project. They thought I was an expert on teenagers and rock and roll, which is kind of a joke because I usually don't like those kind of films, but so I had a satirical approach to it. Allan Arkush and Joe Dante were heading the trailer department at New World. They were editors, and they were editing other films, and they both wanted to be directors. And so they were lobbying Roger for a chance to direct. So they had glommed onto my script, Rock City it was called, and it was going to be Allan directing the story scenes and Joe directing the musical. No, I'm sorry, the other way around, because Allan is a big rock and roll aficionado. He was going to do the musical numbers of the Dick Clark American Bandstand kind of stuff. And Joe, who's from Philadelphia, was going to do the story scenes with the kids and everything. It would have been a nice match of talents. And then, unfortunately, the story editor gave the script to Dick Clark, who made known his displeasure with it. So that killed that project. So then Joe and Allan were looking for things to do, and Allan, being a big fan of rock and roll, wanted to do something with some rock group, but he had only vague notions.
Director Allan Arkush.
Death Race was a hit. To give you a little inside info on Death Race, the original script, and I think his name was Robert Tom, I think it came from a book. In any case, that was a very satirical movie. And the version that Paul Bartel directed and previewed was really funny. And Roger didn't like that it was so funny. And he edited a lot of the good stuff out. It was kind of upsetting, I got to say. It's one of my first doses of reality in Hollywood. That he didn't see the same movie that we did. And actually, a lot of Sylvester Stallone's best stuff got edited out of that movie. Because Paul did a lot of improvising in it. It was very funny. Roger wanted it more grim and more violent. Paul had tongue-in-cheek on it. So it was a hit, and so Roger had a poster made for, he's going to do a sequel right away, Death Sport. And it was a guy on a motorcycle. And the poster was great. But so he wanted to have a script made, and the process started of the script. And I think every script was awful. Because I remember at a certain point it was offered to all of us. Even though we desperately wanted to make our first movie, none of us would touch this terrible script of Death Sport. They really didn't have enough. See, in Death Race, you knew what the race was about, and the running people over and the government and all this stuff. In Death Sport, they didn't have any of these ideas. It was kind of a warmed-over Star Wars thing with this group of people in the desert on motorcycles that were supposed to be like Jedis. There was mutants. But it was kind of, all in all, the script was incomprehensible. And I didn't want to direct it, and Joe didn't want to direct it, and Roger approached a bunch of other people, and no one really wanted to direct it. And a film student, through an agent friend of Roger's named Nick Nicephore, came on and did a rewrite in 2 or 3 weeks and started to direct it. And Nick had not had any experience with the Corman Company and Roger. He had come from out of SC. And one of the reasons that Joe and I had a successful time with Roger is that we understood what he wanted, because we had worked there for over a course of 5 years. And that 5 years in that part of your life is like 10 years anywhere else, you know? It's like high school, you know? The experience of high school is so important to you. It really feels like you're in high school for 20 years. All our 20s, all we did was work for New World. And 7 days a week, all day long, that's what we talked about, and that's what we did. That gave us a real sense of how it worked and what his taste was and what he wanted. And that's why Hollywood Boulevard is so audaciously self-referential. We were kind of living it. It's all we knew, so we made a movie about it. You know, it's kind of absurd that your first movie would be about what you're doing. But that's what we did, because we had to make something that Roger would be interested in putting in theaters that had exploitable elements for a trailer and advertising and a poster and looked like another New World picture. So we did a satire of a New World picture, whatever the movie equivalent is of a Roman or Clef. That sport was just a trial. I mean, I had to come in after the director's cut, and the director left. I just worked on it, tried to make sense of it, and went out and shot a whole bunch of footage and edited it together and worked hard on it, because but it interrupted my goal, which was to make Rock and Roll High School. At that point, I had already worked on Grand Theft Auto, and I was in the process of developing, so to speak, although the way Roger did it, it's not the way studios develop, a high school movie that had started out as Girls' Gym and mutated slowly into being Rock and Roll High School. So I was working on that and whatever other trailers were around when Death Sport was screened for Roger, and I was there to see the director's cut. And the director left, and Roger just said, I'm going to push your movie aside, and you have to finish Death Sport. And, you know, that was kind of, if you want to make your high school movie, you got to fix this, you know. And while I was fixing that, I guess Saturday Night Fever and Thank God It's Friday started making money. So all those kinds of movies are making money. So he said, okay, well, now you can do it as a musical, because I see that that's a possibility, and that's what you wanted to do to begin with. So that's how it became that. Because the movies at the time, 78, were successful, had disco music in it. I mean, the soundtrack to Saturday Night Fever, I think, sold 20 million copies. Thank God It's Friday and so forth. So he was letting us make this movie, which he thought was being called Disco High.
And Roger at that time was a Writers Guild signatory, and I was a Writers Guild member. And you had to pay people $8,000 for an original script. But if they did a rewrite, you could get away with paying them only $4,000. So what Roger would do was he would, and in this case with Rock and Roll High School, he had Joe Dante and Allan Arkush sit around with a tape recorder for 2 days, just talking a script into a tape recorder, just improvising this so-called script, and then had a secretary type the thing, and he gave them $200, and he claimed that was the first draft. It was only 60 pages long, and it really was a mess. It didn't have any story or anything.
I dictated a script into a tape machine with a stenographer there with Joe Dante, and I did that. And then we gave that to Joe McBride, who's now a respected film professor and has written books on John Ford and everything, who worked for Roger at the time. And he did the first 2 drafts or 3 drafts of that.
But what they said was, you know, we have this movie that basically was a bunch of scenes of teenagers goofing around in a high school, and it had something to do with rock and roll, and that was about it. And they said, we need a plot, a story, and if you can, this was a Friday afternoon, they said, if you can come up with a story by Monday, you can write the script. So I went home and thought about it, and as writers do, we tend to have files of stories and ideas that we'd like to film, and one of the things that had been kicking around in my mind was my father, Raymond McBride, who was a reporter in the Milwaukee Journal. In 1928, he was student body president at Superior Central High School in Wisconsin, and he led a strike of his school because the kids were rebelling against a strict administration. One of the things that had happened, they'd fired a woman teacher who they loved, And so the kids all went out on strike, and this became a national news story. It apparently had never happened before in America. And they were on strike for a month, and the school caved in and rehired this teacher. And the kids were so nice in those days that they agreed to go to school in the summer to make up for the lost time. So I thought there was an interesting story there, but it seemed kind of tame for the late 1970s. But then, so I thought this would give it more of a political dimension to have a strike going on about something serious, and it wouldn't be just kids goofing around. They'd be rebelling for a reason. Then there was a scene in the script in which, in the chemistry lab, the kids were making drugs, some kind of drug in a barrel, and they had a pet monkey in the school, and the monkey drank the drugs and became like King Kong and broke through the roof of the high school. It was a really stupid scene, but it gave me the idea of, we should have some kind of destruction of the school going on. And then I flashed on the fact that in 1970, I had covered with the Wisconsin State Journal, where I was a reporter, the students. I was the riot reporter because I was the only young male reporter there. So every time the students had a riot, which happened all the time, I would be out in the streets reporting on it. And the anti-war movement was getting very violent at the time. And they blew up a building on campus, Sterling Hall, which was the headquarters of the Army Math Research Center, which was planning bombing missions for Vietnam. So the students were against it, but they blew it up, killed a graduate student, which helped end the anti-war movement. It was very tragic and counterproductive. One of the things that turned a lot of more peaceful protesters against protest, and it enabled Nixon to widen the war, so it was a really terrible thing. But I thought, okay, let's have the students blow up the high school at the end of the film. My point, which Allan Arkush, I don't think to this day has ever understood the ending of Rock and Roll High School. I wasn't celebrating, let's go out and blow up your high school. I was doing it as a kind of a commentary on how legitimate protest gets out of control and spirals into violence. And they added a little bit that I didn't write at the end, where the disc jockey says to the camera, if you want this to happen at your school, just give old Screamin' Steve a call. I'm in the phone book under Screamin', which I was kind of appalled because I didn't think that was the point of the blowing up the school. I thought it was a kind of the commentary on things getting out of control. And I was also thinking of the French film Zero for Conduct, the Vigo film in which kids take over a boarding school and run rampant in the school. So I combined all this stuff over the weekend, and they thought this would be a good story for the film. However, Allan Arkush didn't want to have the kids blow up the school. He said, well, it'll make the kids unsympathetic. And I had to figure out how to persuade him to do it. My girlfriend at the time was a journalist, and she had been on the set of a Jonathan Kaplan film for Orion Pictures, and Jonathan Kaplan was an alumnus of New World Pictures, Roger Corman's company. It was called Over the Edge, and it's a serious film about juvenile delinquents in a suburb, and at the end of the film, they burned down the local recreation center, which the parents have built for them in a sort of futile effort to try to appease their rebellion. And it's a sad, kind of tragic ending to the film, but it's just a small building they burned down. So I had this brainstorm. I thought everybody who works for New World Pictures hates the directors who've gone on to work for the big studios. So I said, to Alan, Jonathan Kaplan is just shooting this film called Over the Edge, where they burned down a small building at the end of the film. What we need to do is top what Jonathan Kaplan is doing. We got to blow up the high school and make it a big, spectacular ending. And Alan got very excited, He said, yeah, we got to do that. We got to top Jonathan Kaplan. And, so I was using my psychology there to win. And so I won the argument. And now Alan says that he thought of this ending. He's been saying this for, how many years now? Since Rock and Roll High School came out, 36 years. He started telling the press that he thought of blowing up his high school when he was a student at his high school in New York, and that this is his lifelong fantasy. He wanted to do it on film, but he conveniently forgets that he didn't want to do it until I tricked him into doing it. I called him at the time when he first started saying that, and I said, every time you tell that lie, I'm going to give an interview and tell the press the true story, so I'm doing it again here.
He had the high school being blown up in there and a lot of rebellion, and I had some of those ideas based on my own daydreams in high school, had the Concha thing in there. And so at one point, Chuck Griffith, who wrote Little Shop of Horrors, those things, he had done a draft, but nothing that in Chuck's draft ended up in the movie. So while I was doing Death Sport, I met two of the guys who were in Death Sport playing mutants. They were film students. Going back in time, if you were a film student around the late 70s, you kind of started hearing about Corman. So we're talking a couple of years after I had been there, you know. So I guess they had seen Hollywood Boulevard at some point.
Screenwriters Richard Whitley and Russ Dvonch.
I can tell you, prior to this, no one wanted to see our 60mm films. But when we walked in, by good luck, Allan Arkush and Joe Dante happened to be there at the time.
When we walked in, we asked for jobs. They said, no way. We were not hiring. And I think we asked if Allan Arkush and Joe Dante were there, because we had seen this movie that they made for only $60,000 called Hollywood Boulevard. And by luck would have it, they were there.
That's right. They just happened to make their own student films, about 4 years prior to that, so they knew what was going on with us. So they said, sure, we'll take a look at it.
Yeah, and we gushed over their movie, and they actually were surprised that we'd actually seen it. Sure, I mean, we were quoting lines and stuff. Would you look at our student films? Absolutely. And then, for some reason, the secretary, who was kind of curt to us, then said, hey, you guys want to earn $15 as mutants in a movie called Death Sport. And so Russ and I showed up at Griffith Park the next day at the famous cave where Roger had made so many science fiction movies, the cave from the Batmobile drove out of in the 60s television show. And Russ and I were mutants with ping pong balls cut in half over our eyes, wearing the rags from Western costume that the lepers wore in Papillon.
It was called Death Sport, and it was a Roger Corman film, and that was our first start in the movies.
The day we went up there, they were waiting in the office for us, because the office by then, I think, was in Brentwood. We were in Hollywood. And they were, at the same time, people coming in to be cast to play mutants in Death Sport. So they were sitting in a lobby, and this PA came up and says, excuse me, are you here to be mutants? And they said, no, we're here actually to be writers, but we'd love to be mutants. That's the kind of guys they were. So they got a job as mutants. And we saw the student film, and we just talked to them briefly. And so then when I was reshooting Death Sport, they were playing mutants in it.
We were there for like 12 hours with no food. We only got $15. Russ and I even volunteered to do stunt work because we were bored. We were both killed by David Carradine twice. It was very exciting.
That's right.
and with fake blood and everything. And then like a week or so later, we get a call from Allan Arkush and Joe Dante saying, come on in. So it was actually Allan and Mike Fennell. And they had seen our student films and were duly impressed. Russ's was very well done. Mine was just cornucopia of just gags and silliness, but Russ's, clearly, you had talent, Russ. Yours was like really well done. And so they gave us this script, remember, Russ, called Girls Gym.
Yeah. Basically, Mike Fennell, who produced Rock and Roll High School, and I gave them like 15 pages of the script and said, rewrite this by Monday. And then if it's good, we'll let you know. But they wrote a whole bunch of stuff really quickly.
They gave us the script and they said, take any 20 or 30 pages and do a rewrite and make it funny. And that's your test.
And that's all the Eaglebauer stuff. They wrote all that over a weekend or a week or whatever it was, a couple of days. And we liked it a lot, and we got the money because we needed a script out of Roger and to have them write the script. So they wrote the last probably 2 drafts of Rock and Roll High School. I know they did all the adjustments after the was clear it was not going to be called Disco High. Got rid of all the disco stuff. And then when we had the Ramones, they did a draft that reflected the Ramones. stuff in it.
So that's what we did, and I continued to work off and on for Allan as a production assistant on when he did reshoots. The film was really terrible death sport, so they had to do a lot of reshoots, put a lot more explosions in it, Roger said. So that's what Allan did. And during that time, we would write the screen pages. He was really auditioning us, to see whether or not we could handle the job.
Russ and I just jammed it with every Three Stooges, Jerry Lewis, Buster Keaton influence jokes without stealing, just jammed it with chock full of as many jokes as we could. They loved it. I remember they took us to a pizza place. They said, we're going to get you in the Writers Guild, we're going to hire you to rewrite it, and we want you guys to act in the movie as well.
There were a couple of writers who were brought in to kind of make the thing zanier, and they rewrote parts of the script, and so it became kind of a collaboration that Joe and Allan had worked on it, and then I did 5 drafts, and these other writers did a draft or 2, and so it was a real kind of potpourri of things. But Allan Arkush kind of deserves a lot of credit for keeping the tone consistent. He wanted something that was surreal black comedy, and he got it.
It was not funny. It was just really not funny and didn't really work. We kind of infused it with fun, and we connected with Allan, who, I remember when we got the job that time, he took us to the corner of Vine and Selma, where the Hollywood, the stars on the Walk of Fame there, and he pointed down to Preston Sturges' star. And he said, this should be our influence. We should try to make a movie as good as him. And I remember we were kind of like silent looking at this. For me, I remember that moment specifically because, oh my God, this is my dream to be with someone who loves old movies as much as me. But I think Allan interpreted us as our silence as being ignorant of who Preston Sturges was. And I think we both said, are you kidding? He said, so you do know who Preston Sturges is, right? And of course, Sullivan's Travels, Hell, the Conquering Hero, and he wrote Easy Living, oh my God, and Christmas in July. And he said, great. And he took us for pizza, and as we started to rewrite, he said, I want you guys on the set and, want you to be involved. We connected on a film school level and the love of old movies and Frank Tashlin and everything. And we just connected 100%. And I think Allan, we kind of bonded with Allan over that love of old movies and everything. And I think if we hadn't known who Preston Sturges was, we would have started off maybe not as on such a strong footing.
I have to say I'm not treated well by Allan Arkush, who likes to deny that I had as much creative input as I did, because I really created the plot and the characters pretty much, and the film sticks pretty closely to my plot and characters, and these other guys did the dialogue. I mean, I write better dialogue than that film has. I mean, it's pretty silly dialogue, but the characters and the plot wouldn't exist without me, and the political dimensions of the film are something I put into it. So Allan doesn't like to give credit to other people, so he likes to make people think it's all his brainchild. So I've been sort of kept out of the loop of things like audio commentaries and documentaries and stuff like that. But I know what I did, and my credit's on the screen, so I'm happy.
The story credit for the movie Rock and Roll High School was shared by Allan and Joe Dante. We weren't there at the beginning to know what they were doing, what they were discussing, but as the film progressed, it was clearly Allan Arkush's baby, and he really was the driving force and the vision behind the movie. Without him, there would be no Rock and Roll High School. Certainly not what we see today. It would have been some guy just doing Girls' Gym. So he's really the one who set everything in motion, who had a clear vision of what to do, and was actually very talented at directing. I mean, he knew how to, especially for Roger Corman, how to move things along very quickly to get the shots he needed, and then move on to the next scene so he could shoot it cheaply and get the thing done. He really was the driving force behind the movie. There would be no Rock and Roll High School without him.
It was like his dream was to have the Yardbirds come to his high school and blow it up. It was absolutely Allan's dream, and so the story was his and Joe's. And I don't know how much of the script they had written. We didn't get the feeling that they just had done the story. And so when we were working with Allan, it was clear that he had this amazing vision on what it should be. And Russ and I were fortunate that we were able to channel Allan's energy and just just adhere to his vision.
Most directors, after the script is done, don't want to be bothered with the writers. They're just a nuisance on the set. Allan was completely opposite. He wanted us on the set. He wanted ideas to keep coming as things developed, to get more gags if we could. So we became very spoiled. We thought, oh, this is the way all movies are made, that the writers are very respected, and their input is needed throughout the entire movie. Exactly the opposite of the future that was the store for us. I mean, no one, once the script is written, the last thing they want is to see the writer on the set.
First-time writers ever being invited on the set, and Halley's Comet. It's about as often.
And we had a fake draft that we used. We went around to the different schools, because school would get a location, they wanted to see the script. So we would give them a draft that didn't obviously have the school blowing up in it or any of that stuff in there.
And Allan was just the biggest mensch. He just treated us with respect, and we were inspired by him. And as Russ said, we were invited on the set at all times, and it was just terrific. We were completely spoiled after that. Why can't it always be like this? And while Russ and I were writing the script, I was a tour guide at Universal Studios, and Russ was working in the editing room at New World. We would get together at night in my kitchen across the street from Universal Studios and write the script. It was always the group. We didn't know what the group was going to be. So in the script, the original script is the group. And we would try to come up with some gags and bits, but it was just the group. And
yeah, we couldn't really write very much for the group until we know who they were.
We had to find a band, and it was just me and Mike Fennell, so we were not exactly savvy in the music business, We were two guys in our 20s who, knew what we liked. I had liked Cheap Trick, and we had liked, we had talked with Todd Rundgren, and we were just doing the best we could.
There's been many articles since that Allan had been meeting with the record companies, and they pitched Devo and all this kind of stuff. And I think he met with Todd Rundgren, who turned us down, and he also met. Didn't he meet with Cheap Trick? Because I think Cheap Trick was close to wanting to do it, right, Russ?
That's right. And the only reason they did it is because it would have cost them money to make the movie. They were making more money on the road and doing their albums than they would have made because Roger was so cheap. They wouldn't pay him very much. So the Ramones kind of got it by default, but we're glad they did because they added the punk attitude to the film that needed that. I think Cheap Trick would have been good because they had a certain wackiness to it with the Bunny and the other guy being kind of wacky characters.
And Roger had a lawyer in his legal department, Barbara Boyle, who's now one of the big deans of UCLA Film School. Barbara Boyle, and one of the most important business affairs of women lawyers in the motion picture business, had met Roger, and she was his head of business affairs. And she had hired someone named Paul Almond, who had worked on Warner's Music. So Paul and Barbara were the people you could go to, and I went to them and pleaded my case to them first about not doing disco music because I knew that wouldn't work. And then I went to Roger with their blessing.
It went from Girls Gym, which is just the perfect name if you're going to do a Roger Corman movie in a movie. It would be called Girls Gym. It went to Disco High, which I think was Roger's idea to get on the bandwagon of disco. And the way Allan has told it, we weren't in the room, that he got up on a couch and started strumming the guitar and just, saying, Roger, would you go to a discotheque? And he said, yes, I would. Would you go to a rock and roll club? No, I wouldn't. That's why it has to be Rock and Roll High School. We're making a movie about a place the parents wouldn't go.
We had a meeting, and I explained all about the difference between disco music and the kind of rock that I wanted in the movie. And to his credit, Roger understood instantly the differences. He may not have thought about it because he wasn't listening to either of them, But when explained to him that, disco is the music of people with money and your parents and people go in limos to nightclubs, that's not what you blow up a high school to. You want the music of rebellion. I explained to him, the bands that I felt had a rebellious spirit. We might in that first discussion mention punk rock, but I certainly mentioned The Who. And destruction of instruments as a form of what a band does that leads to, the kind of action that we needed, if we're going to blow up the high school. And I also went to a concert at Hollywood High School. The opening act was Nick Lowe, Mink DeVille was on it, and Elvis Costello. And I took a lot of pictures of the crowd because that's what I wanted the kids to look like, the kind of people I was seeing at concerts. And I showed those pictures to Roger. Paul Almond and Paul called up Warner Brothers and got me a meeting with one of their A&R people. And we just talked bands, and what was coming out. And I was pretty well up on a lot of stuff. And among the bands that Warner's had at that time, had just signed Devo and had just signed Van Halen. That's when I saw the Devo tapes, the original videotapes of Devo that they had made. They'd done these little films and stuff. And, they were great, but it was too far afield of what we wanted. And Van Halen was somebody we considered, but I think everyone kind of felt that wouldn't work. And whatever the reason was, we went off of that. And then the topic came up of a label within Warner Brothers called Sire Records, which was headed by Seymour Stein. And Sire was starting to sign bands. Had done this for 2 or 3 years, and that was this sort of avant-garde label within Warner Brothers. And I had a lot of a bunch of Sire records, so that's when the name of the Ramones came up. The first place I ever heard of the Ramones was in the Village Voice. Village Voice is a newspaper, and that's where I got a lot of information about music in the 70s and the 80s. Robert Christgau's columns. And the people who wrote for The Voice really kept me up to date on music while I lived in Los Angeles. And I remember a review that Christgau had written about the second Ramones album and how not only was it a great record, it was advocated, sniffing glue, and it seemed to also think that DDT was something that we should be aware of in lobotomy. And it was funny. It was like he was saying, and they're against DDT. Sire had a lot of records, a bunch of new artists, and they also were very good at licensing band and music. They had a catalog that for such a new label was deeper than most. I guess the Warners had to deal with them and wanted to give them stuff to do. So, the sound of the Ramones sounded like a good idea because I liked Rocket to Russia so much, certainly. And I liked the first album a lot, but I loved Rocket to Russia. So a meeting was set up between myself and Mike Fennell and the manager of the Ramones at the time, Linda Stein, who was the wife of the head of the record company, was also managing the Ramones. And the manager of Ramones at the time was a guy by the name of Danny Fields, who I knew of because he used to write for Hit Parader magazine, which I read. And he was kind of, if you knew the music business, he had been going to the film more regularly when I worked there, but more important than that, he had discovered Iggy and the Stooges and the MC5, or he had gotten them signed to Elektra Records. So that's kind of led to a meeting with them, and that's how they got in the movie, and that's how the relationship with Warner's happened. What I remember about the meeting with Linda and Danny was that it happened very quickly after my meeting with Paul Almond and Roger. Oh, no, actually, after my meeting at Warner Brothers with Warner's people. I think that basically, though they were in town, in my memory, we drove to the hotel the next day where they were staying. It may have been like that, it's a long time ago. So we went there and we told them the story of the movie. They didn't really want to read the script, but, we just kind of told them what it was about in the conversation. And I do remember that Linda was smoking a lot of pot while we were talking about it. And then Danny may have been also. And as we told the story, they kind of really got into it, And then we said, and we got to the part where we said, at the end of the movie, because these are Ramones, we inserted their name into the story as we told them, They pull up at the concert, and they play a song for Riff, and Joey appears in the bedroom. Just kind of pitched it to them that way. I knew the band's music really pretty well. So I knew Joey was the singer. And so I could say Joey sings in the, I didn't have a real concept yet of it. It was how I was going to do it, but that's how it fitted in. And then I said at the end, the kids take over the school and the Ramones show up and play in the school while the kids are sort of running around taking over. And then at the end of the movie, the Ramones play the theme song while the kids blow up to high school. And Linda and Danny just sat up and they go, "That's it. We love it. We're in. We're going to do this. I'm going to put the boys into it." The image of the Ramones playing while the school blew up was the same image that Roger wanted, and they responded immediately. So they must have talked the band into it.
Actor Clint Howard.
Cheap Trick had been offered the role in Rock and Roll High School, but they wanted too much. And the Ramones were willing to do it soup to nuts for like $20,000. That is, appear in the movie, create do the music, do the performance, be on the album, the whole thing. And Roger always likes that. I mean, I think Cheap Trick wanted $100,000. And at the time, of course, then In Color came out, and Cheap Trick became a stadium band. And the Ramones were always just cultish and punkish. As it turned out, it was great. In the long run, it probably helped the cult status of the movie, and having that influence in Rock and Roll High School probably in the long run may have been better for it than having Cheap Trick.
When it became the Ramones, I remember meeting them for the first time. It was kind of an amazing night. We were invited to Allan Arkush's house, and Allan was there along with the producer Mike Fitnell, who also treated us wonderfully, and the Ramones. And so what are we going to do there, Mike? We're going to watch Hard Day's Night. And in Allan's personal 16-millimeter print, because he wanted to show the Ramones not to be afraid of lip-syncing, because it was before MTV. My memory is that the Ramones weren't sure about the lip-syncing. Is that how you remembered it, Russ?
Yeah, they thought the Beatles were actually singing the song live on the set. They needed some convincing that, no, they recorded it before, and then they're just mouthing it along,
My memory is that Allan is when we found out that Johnny was this huge Hollywood movie buff. Huge, more than a buff, just loved movies. And so that's how we connected with them. That my memory is that Johnny owned like 300 movies on videotape then. And because I remember you and I talking with him about movies. And so that knowledge of movies helped because Allan could reference a Gene Kelly movie or a Fred Astaire movie. They recorded it first and then would lip sync. And then I think that was a big part in getting them convinced to feel more comfortable about it.
The Ramones had thought that Rocket to Russia was going to be a commercial album. I mean, now when you hear it, it obviously sounds so commercial. But then the Ramones were being painted with the brush of punk rock. And punk rock was not popular. And the Sex Pistols were sort of reviled. I remember there's a big article about them when Road to Ruin came out, and it was all about how they were new wave. They weren't punk. And I think that probably irked Johnny to some degree. So that was they were trying to find something where they could have some exposure because they were touring in a van, crisscrossing across the country, and basically just playing concerts in clubs for Ramones fans. And when we did Rock and Roll High School, they did those gigs, and they were playing opening act for Black Sabbath in places like Bakersfield and getting booed off the stage. You have to understand how radical those songs sounded then. The monomania of what makes them so great was lost on everybody. They were popular in a couple of cities, and that was it. And the movie was being made for $200,000 or $300,000, so actually it's supposed to be $200,000. So the idea of using a band as obscure as the Ramones, and also that was off the beaten path, and so outside of what kind of music was popular, even within the realm of the ages of punk rock. Remember, we're talking the biggest bands in the country was Fleetwood Mac with Rumors, and Bob Seger was big, Bruce Springsteen was big. I mean, these are all wonderful bands, but the Ramones were on the fringe. And so using that for a movie that was barely going to get made, that was as fringe, all made sense because that's what we were doing. Plus, it fitted the real theme of what I was doing, which was that when you're in high school, you need to find a group that are like yourself, that you kind of identify with. whether if you be a greaser or a surfer or whatever, or today a stoner or whatever it is, you seek out your friends. And you always think of yourself as outsiders, and you have to find your place. And in the generations that I grew up in, one way that kids found identity was through music. Music was so central to our lives. It's not anymore, Music hardly matters anymore on the cultural scale of things. It certainly doesn't accent societal changes the way it did in the 60s. Riff Randall, here was this girl who was so middle class, and so she could have been a cheerleader the year before, but, at 17 years old, your life changes so radically. She somehow had heard the Ramones and heard this kind of music and decided that she really liked this kind of music. And she used it as a point of identity for herself. And that's something I had witnessed since I was in high school, and certainly had witnessed in working at the Film Maurice.
But it gave us a lot more to work with humor-wise because of the strangeness of Riff being this California blonde falling for the Ramones and Joey and all that. And that was nice. That was nice to work off of.
After that night of watching Hard Day's Night with the Ramones, my memory, Russ, is that you and I were so inspired that we did a draft on our own, writing bits for the band, and we gave it to Allan. Look at Allan, and Allan goes, "This is fantastic. They won't be able to say any of this dialogue." But then after a while, we in one of the recent Blu-ray, I think I was telling you, Mike, that Russ and I and Allan met over at the Shout Factory when preparing for the Blu-ray. I saved everything. I guess I'm kind of a hoarder, so I had all these photos and everything, and I had all these photos, and Russ did too. But what I had is all the original script pages of all the different drafts, and Russ and I had come up with all these bits for the Ramones and one of our favorite bits was they're backstage at the concert and they go to open their closet and it's nothing but leather jackets and jeans in clear plastic dry cleaner bags, which we thought was a pretty good joke, right? And they said, no, we can't make fun of our image. But that's in the Shout Factory DVD. And as you probably know, so we're writing the script, and Russ and I are having a great time. I was not in on any auditions. Russ was there for some auditions. I was not.
Yeah, I was there for when PJ did her audition, and she dressed with her own clothes like PJ, and she did. I was there. I saw a lot of actresses audition. She's far and away the best one, and she's one of the key movies. I have 4 key reasons why I think the movie is still remembered today. One is Allan Arkush. The second is PJ Soles. I can't imagine anyone else in that part being as good as she was. Her youth and vitality, her peppiness, her great looks, that is something that a kid in high school wanted to see, and it just added so much to the movie. We never had an actor or actress ever say our dialogue before, and when we saw her deliver her lines, we were really taken with it because we said, yeah, that's exactly what we were thinking, It turned out really well. So,
she made us look good. I remember right around the time of the casting, it was Halloween time of 78. And we all went and saw Halloween. And afterwards we said, that girl, we need to get her. Because she was so amazing in Halloween. And of course, she was the one wearing the hat in Carrie. Allan and PJ are 2 of the hugest reasons. Absolutely.
Actress PJ Soles.
I think I was called in because I think Allan Arkush said he had seen me in Halloween. So this is the reason, to do, people would say, well, why were you starting out doing independent films or low budget? And, when you're that age and you're just starting out, you do anything you can, and especially, I thought Halloween was a cool movie, even on the script. And when I met John Carpenter, I was like, oh, this guy's really cool. I'd already worked with Brian De Palma. And then I met John Carpenter. I'm like, wow. And Deborah Hill, I adored her. I thought, wow, this is like a power couple here. But you never think, people always say, gosh, did you know when you first read the script it was going to be long-lasting? No, you just go for who you think is going to be fun to work with, if you like the part, if you like the script. You never think, gosh, I hope this is going to make $100 million, because you're not a part of that. You're getting, you're just hoping that you're going to do good and somebody else is going to notice you, which Allan Arkush did. And they called me in, and I think they had a whole bunch of other people. And I remember I went on 3 auditions, and the third audition, Roseanne Arquette was in the waiting room chewing gum. And when I walked in, she's like, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I'm up for my hopefully last audition." She says, "Well, I already got the parts. I don't know why you're here." And she's chewing gum, and I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I went in kind of disturbed, but in any event, I read, and then they brought in Roger Corman, and all he said after my reading was, "Make your hair a little bit more blonde, and you got the part." So when I walked out, I went, "Bye, Rosanna." So that's my memory of that, thinking, all right, well, they told me I got the part, so I'm not going to believe Rosanna. But she got Desperately Seeking Susan, so it's okay. That was her rock and roll movie. Usually at these auditions in the 70s, the girls were really nice and fun and friendly. We all wished each other luck when we went in. We all knew we were all different. So, I saw all the girls from Carrie all the time, Amy Irving, Nancy Allen. We were always at the same auditions together for, television, movies, movie of the week, guest stars on TV shows like Simon and Simon. And we were all like, yay! And the best one was Tom Hanks' now wife, Rita Wilson. She was hilarious at every audition. She never got a role, but she was always funny. But she got the role, which was opposite Tom Hanks.
Actress Dey Young.
I went to college outside of Los Angeles, to Pomona College. It was just a wonderful private small Claremont colleges. I went to Scripps in Pomona and had a great experience there as a theater major. Then went on to London, to the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Arts, and then came back. And literally, I think within the first week, I was staying at my sister's house. I was at a party. I didn't even have an agent yet. And a casting director came up to me and she says, you should go up on this movie. They're really looking for this one character. So I went in on it. I was the last character. I met with Allan and Mike Fennell, the producer, just the Friday before, and then we were filming.
Cinematographer Dean Cundey.
I had been working on various low-budget movies for a while. The first couple of movies I ever worked on out of film school was for Roger Corman. I did makeup on a couple of films. What I really wanted to do out of film school, which is shooting cinematography. So I did several low-budget films. And then one morning I got a phone call that said that Roger was doing this movie, Rock and Roll High School, and was I interested, even though, I had been sort of moving up on different films. And I said, well, absolutely, why not? It sounds intriguing. And besides, it's Roger Corman, who had sort of given me a start. I agreed. The director and all the various people had been sort of involved with the Corman group on various films, and, they all came out of that same sort of school. So I thought, sure, why not?
The DP was Dean Cundey, who had just didn't he do Halloween? And I was channel surfing the other night, and I saw the opening credits for Roller Boogie with Linda Blair, and he did that too.
That's right, I remember that, yeah.
And Dean was just a class act completely.
And Dean Cundey was the DP, and he was the DP on Halloween, so that was kind of fun the first day when we showed up. He's like, what are you doing here? And I said, I'm Riff Randall. What are you doing here? She says, I'm filming you. I go, oh, good, I'm in good hands then.
And the writers were on the set all the time, and one of them, Russ, became a character. He was a character in the locker, who gets shoved into the locker. He was the writer, one of the writers, and then there was Richard Whitley, who was the other one, and, they were all on the set, and it just was a very collaborative experience. It's great.
One day, Allan said, "Let's do a scene where you're being harassed in the hallway." So and it was in his place, in his home. So the two hall monitors and I just started riffing together and said, "Okay, yeah, let's do it that way." So that wasn't really written down. We just kind of did it on the set, and I said, okay, that's good. Let's go on to the next scene. So that was kind of improvised.
Absolutely. And if you notice inside Russ's locker, because he's dressed like Harold Lloyd in the movie The Freshman, inside is the words Harold Lamb lives. Harold Lamb is Harold Lloyd's character in the movie The Freshman. If you think of Russ as the freshman in the hallway where the hall monitors are harassing him, Russ does a line that we wrote from our previous script, which was, I'm allergic to violence, I break out in blood. Some people would say it's an influence, but I'm going to say it. We stole that from Woody. Russ and I do the script, and we're finished, and they're going to start shooting. I quit my job as a tour guide. They're going to make our movie. We got to be there. And Russ, you're going to be there on the set. The both of us, Allan wanted us to be there every day. But you should know, Mike, that maybe you know this already. The part of the freshman who gets shoved in the locker, that's Russ.
When we wrote it, we didn't know that we were writing anything for me. But the only reason I got the job was because they were running out of money. Roger kept cutting the script budget, and it was a shoot that was a union shoot for the actors. And so they said, look, we can't afford to buy any more actors. Would you mind doing it for free? I said, sure. So that's how I got the part. Not because of my wonderful talent.
Right. And I think, Russ, your joke is, since we started off being a mutant, and at New World Pictures we worked our way up from mutant to screenwriter, that's like the normal trajectory, I think, in New World, to go from mutant to screenwriter. That's right. So there we are on the set every day, and Russ is going to play that part, which was just terrific. And that's, I think, one of my favorite running gags is that you show up everywhere. And I think in the early drafts you were like even in more places. In one of the one of the script pages that's on the Blu-ray is I think Dee Dee or Johnny opens up his guitar case in the backstage, and you're in it. Oh, Mr. Ramone, please. But being on the set was just amazing. I just absolutely loved it. There was such an energy, and everyone. Just the very first day of shooting was the scene up on Mulholland Drive where Eagle Bar is with Tom and Kate up there. And you should know that when Allan offered Russ and myself the job and saying, we're going to pay you, we're going to get you in the Writers Guild, we want you to act in it, there was two parts in the original script named Eagle Bauer and Strump, and they wanted us initially to play both of those parts. And those were named after two characters. This is Allan's influence from Ernst Lubitsch's Design for Living. And we knew that, which was another connection with Allan, that we loved old movies and knew who Eagle Bauer and Strump were. And so as Russ and I did the rewrite, only Eagle Bauer survived. As Russ will, I think, attest to this, my memory, Russ, is that we wrote Eagle Bauer as Sergeant Bilko.
That's right. We were trying to make a Sergeant Bilko character out of him.
Absolutely, because he's always got a scam going, and I think even in my kitchen we would go, wow, 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 wow. It's like, which is what Phil Silvers would always say.
Well, that was a blast. I mean, it really, listen, that was probably, I mean, working with Ron on Grand Theft Auto was fun, but Rock and Roll High School, you know, being on my own, being in a movie that had a lot of music, being a comedy, I had peers with me, you know, Vince Van Patten and PJ and Dey, and then there was this band, the Ramones, you know, that I actually was not a Ramones devotee at the time.
I was not a Ramones fan. So when Allan Arkush, when I got the part and met with him, and then he handed me a cassette, he said, go home, listen to this, you're their number one fan. I couldn't relate to it, except I was impressed with the energy of it, and I thought, oh, wow, that is amazing. And I thought, if I was going to be their number one fan, I should have that same kind of energy, because maybe that's how I connect to them. So that was very important for me in my performance, and I thought, when I'm on screen, I want to look like I'm in fast motion and everybody else is at regular speed. So that was sort of a guiding principle, and I wanted to talk fast, and I wanted to move fast. I wanted to just be really like a bright light in terms of my wardrobe. I bought all the clothes myself. It was very important to me, you know, the colors and just the sparkliness and the incredible energy that Riff Randall would have, as opposed to Kate, who was like very intelligent, but really sort of a dim bulb when it came to her energy level. So I wanted to show the contrast. But it was really off of Johnny's guitar playing and the sound of the music of the Ramones that I got my inspiration. So I'm happy to know that you noticed it. And some people have told me that, but it was planned.
Riff Randall was based on several women who used to come to the Fillmore East as fans. And I used to talk to them, and they liked, those people, real life people, really, really liked the British bands like Rod Stewart and the Faces. That's when Rod Stewart was really edgy. They liked these raucous British bands, the British blues bands. They did not like the hippy-dippy bands, or the hippie bands. And so, they ended up hanging out with the New York Dolls and people like that. And that's who Riff Randall was based on. And also, to a certain degree, it's just an attitude and a sense of, certainly in no way were they groupies. They were more interested in the music. They loved being around the musicians, but it wasn't the same impulse as a groupie had. And there was a woman who was a journalist who I used to talk to a lot at concerts. Her name is Lisa Robinson. She still writes. I don't think she knows that she was someone who, in my mind, was kind of like, she was serious about music, and knew a lot about music, and Riff Randall certainly does. So Lisa Robinson's book I just read, I thought to myself, boy, someday I'd like to run into Lisa Robinson and tell her that our conversations, just hanging out, because she used to come to a lot of shows, because she was covering it for Paris newspapers. She was my age. She was 20, 21. Led to some formulation of a character like Riff Randall. In any case, that's who Riff Randall is, and that's why the movie continues to this day, because Riff has a real friend in Kate, and Kate is someone who's going through changes in her life, which everyone is in high school. And so I think it's great that the Ramones are in it, but if there had been no relationship between Kate and Riff, and if they hadn't gone through the various adventures and Riff trying to express herself and being pushed down by the school, the movie wouldn't have continued to be as popular. They're just really good characters.
One of the notes that Roger wrote was they didn't want to make Kate too pensive. In other words, they wanted her to be a downer. That was something we did worry about, that we wanted her to be appealing and yet be like the studious kind and all that kind of stuff. So that was a balancing act that we had to figure out. Also, Dey doesn't get as much attention as TJ in the movie, but she plays a very important part and does a very good role with it, a very good job with it. She was extremely beautiful, and she did a good job with what she was given. So we were very pleased by her performance as well.
That was all in Allan's story, because he envisioned Riff Randall. I mean, that was Allan's creation, but she was going to quote, famous lines from lyrics and just be a rock and roll fanatic, and that was his envision. And so Russ and I just, kind of followed that, that inspiration. And, but you're right. But we wrote him just, it was, we wrote him as this great team, but it was fun to write, Kate is kind of the academic, and that was fun. It was such a disparity, and which is kind of what all comedy teams are, right? Kind of the opposite.
That's right.
That was a gas, and they could not have been better.
Actress Mary Woronov.
I was very familiar with the Velvet Underground, of course, and sort of through them, I heard about the Ramones. I knew they were a band, that's all. I really didn't know anything about them. What happened was I actually was going to play it like Miss Brooks, and then I would probably get a series on TV, and people would love me, and I'd make a lot of money. That was my intention. But when I hit the set and saw those screaming kids, when I got into the costume, which was outrageous, I turned into Miss Togar, that's all. It was just like playing Caliban. I was born to play that role. I loved it.
Talk about a live cartoon. Like, my God, we had Miss Togar, Mary Woronov, who was just absolutely amazing. Everyone was such a top of their game. Let me reiterate what Russ said. I mean, Allan was the heart and soul of the movie, but it's like just that energy, just adrenaline times 900. PJ Souls just drove it like a locomotive. She was just so amazing. And then Mary Woronov, just wonderful. And then her cohort in crime, Paul Bartel, as Mr. McGree, or as as the Ramones called him, Mr. McGloob. How great was Paul Bartel? And the scene at the end when he's partying with them all night, when they're going to, in the high school, it was after the day after the concert, and then all the parents are on the podium there. And we cut to Paul Bartel hungover. We wanted him to look like Jerry Lewis in The Nutty Professor after he'd been Buddy Love the night before and he was hungover. And I remember telling that to Allan, and he knew exactly what we meant. That first day of filming, Mike, was not only up on Mulholland Drive, where Eagle Bauer with the backdrop. I can't believe we wrote that there was a backdrop of the stars and stuff. It's like, that's insane, but they did it. And I think there's like multi-million-dollar homes up there now on the same location. And from there, I remember it was the first day of shooting, and I said to Dey, "Oh my God, so that's the costume? Oh, you're playing for Kate. Oh, that's perfect. It's so dorky." She goes, "Oh, I haven't gotten in the costume yet." "Oh, I'm sorry." Then from there, we went to a house in Griffith Park near the Greek Theater, and it was in a house where it was PJ and Dey's. It was PJ's bedroom, where it was that scene, and also the scene with Vince and Clint with the van. That was one long day.
Yeah, that was a real van. They didn't mock up that van in order to make it look like a 70s disco. That was an actual van that they found. They had all that stuff in there.
Russ and I, in the previous script, and also because our influences were the Three Stooges and everything, we said, let's try to put a spit take in every movie, right? So, also probably scarred emotionally for life as a small young child watching the Danny Thomas show. If you see the spit take, it's like Clint is bracing for the spit take because it was like...
you can see him. He's closing his eyes there. Here it comes.
Here it comes. So if you watch it, because it's probably the second or third take, but he knows it's coming. That Fitz is going to do the spit take in his face, So that's pretty funny. But the way Allan staged that scene was just tremendous. That Marky's outside, TJ's in the shower, the DD's in the shower. That was because I remember when we were watching Hard Day's Night, Allan, because the Ramones wrote that song for the movie, "I Want You Around," and Allan, I remember in Hard Day's Night. Russ, what's the song when they're just fooling around on the stage, If I Fell in Love?
On the stage or outside?
In the studio. They're in the studio. It's not in front of an audience. Anyways, because Allan said, do a song like that, and they came up with I Want You Around, which is just terrific.
Let's just take the fantasy scene. That was day one of shooting. Day one of shooting. So here, after taking the cassette home and listening to it and not understanding it and going, who are these guys? And then showing up in a bedroom, and the first scene is, to have this spidery, long guy crawl on top of me like a praying mantis and spit in my mouth while he's singing was like, okay. I remember rinsing my mouth out several times after that take.
The shoot was just terrific. I mean, it was just so much fun.
It was such an amazing experience.
It was a fun experience. Most of the time, I was the youngest guy on the set, and there were no other youngsters. Once in a while there'd be a couple of juvenile actors, but generally speaking, I was in an adult world. And Rock and Roll High School, even though there were a lot of adults around, especially, hey, listen, it was rock and roll. I'd turned 18. It was a little bit like Disneyland, sort of like for all those toxic Peter Pans, don't want to grow up. Well, they all end up in rock and roll.
There were a lot of people who had never been in a movie before, and we hardly paid them, and they just did whatever we wanted because the Ramones were there. So let's not include them. Then there were other people, who had acting experience. They were very, very Hollywood. They understood Hollywood. I, on the other hand, was not very Hollywood. I did movies in New York, it's true, and I worked for Warhol, but that's entirely different, isn't it? I was very used to making up my own dialogue, not following direction, and creating a character that was totally not in the script. That's not very Hollywood.
Everyone got along, and everyone were really good sports. I don't remember any problems at all.
We both came from the same background of filmmaking, working in low budgets, and he certainly came out of the Roger Corman school. We had this common background, this common interest in film. I think it was a lot of fun. I remember everything we did was always about the movie. Allan was always about the movie, not about ego or making himself look good or control or whatever. It was always, how do we make the movie best? And I think that's sort of a hallmark of a lot of the good directors, especially early in their careers, is that they are interested in how to make the project, the film, the best it can be. And Allan approached it from that standpoint. He realized that we were doing or trying to do something that was different, at least for the time.
Everything always flows so smoothly on Roger Corman movies. But I think this has become one of his favorite movies, Roger's. Yeah, I love the Eagle Bower. That was really fun. That was fun stuff to do, going in the guy's bathroom and walking through there and then going into his office. That was really a lot of fun. I mean, it was a true innocence. So it was like me playing myself to a certain extent. It was so quick, the whole experience. I think we shot in 18 days, but of course Allan Arkush can just, give you the specifics. But I think it was 18 days, and it was 12-hour days or more for the Roger Corman movie. So, you just kind of worked around the clock. It just, there was no time for rehearsing. You just were into the shots and into the scenes and with very little takes.
1 or 2 takes, and if you were lucky, maybe 3. And I remember Allan always saying, I don't know if you'll remember this either, but it was like, if we're not going to get it, then we got to just move on. And that terrified me. I was like, what? I want every scene that's written in the script to be in the movie. So even like the phone booth scene, which was kind of the hardest to do because there were 3 of us, and I don't remember exactly, but, we pull over to make a call to win the contest so we can go to the concert because our tickets were taken away by Miss Togar. So we win the contest, and there's this other guy that was just proposing to his wife, and we pull him out, and we're dancing on him, stepping on his engagement ring, and it's a really crazy scene, and we were losing the light, and it had to be done quickly because I think they probably were filming on a street corner without a permit and blah, blah, blah. But in any event, 1 or 2 takes, and like I said, maybe 3 if you were lucky. And there were a lot of long hallway scenes, 1 take, so a lot of that was to conserve the time and because it was a 21-day shooting schedule, and we literally could not go over.
But Allan knew exactly what he wanted, and so it was great.
Like a lot of the very technically challenging films that I've worked on, when everybody says, well, this is really interesting and different, you meet the challenge head on and you say, well, whatever it takes, we'll find a way. And as a matter of fact, that was part of the charm of it, was trying to meet these challenges and do musical numbers with, very little time and resources. And it was just so much fun to do it that you weren't daunted by it. If you look at it, music videos, really, and still are, sort of this musical, a whole sort of genre of music and film in its own, Rock and Roll High School sort of foresaw that, predated it, the fact that the Ramones, we shot, I think we did 2 full concerts at the place in Hollywood. It was new to us, certainly, and I suspect it was new to the audience because watching musicals for decades. But this was sort of a new take on that. It wasn't even the musicals of the contemporary time, the Beach Blanket and the Elvis, and that kind of stuff. It was really sort of a zany, younger look at it, I think.
The most intense day was at the Roxy when we did the scenes with the Ramones and all the punk rocker fans, because they decided, let's put an ad out and use the extras so that they get to come to like a free concert and we have this free audience. And they were pretty crazy. They were insane. I think it was misrepresented a bit because they were expecting a concert, and instead they would stop and reshoot, and then have to do the song again and just keep playing the same song until, the film got it correct and all the actors came in. But TJ and I got pushed around a lot, and it was a bit scary where the Ramones actually had to ask the audience members to back off a bit and to be a little gentle. That was an eye opener because I, number one, did not know what punk rock music was. I didn't know who the Ramones were. It was all a shock for me. So my character, Kate Rambeau, is pretty much the innocent that, is very true to what was going on for me as well. It was a really cool experience.
I mean, we shot in the theater shooting the Ramones. I mean, they must have stayed there for 2 days because they locked the doors and turned the clocks back, and nobody really cared.
So I started thinking, well, the lyrics are so funny on this song. I thought it would be great to spell out the DDT, those lyrics, because it's just so absurd, in lobotomy. So then that led to spelling out lobotomy big letters, because remember, like I said, I had done so many trailers and had used lettering so much on the screen and had titles wiped in and out. And since all the operatives were being done by Jack Rabin anyway, I just applied the kind of thing that we were doing on trailers. When I spelled D-U-M-B, I thought, well, it'd be funny if they spelled it wrong, Which actually in the making, towards the end of the movie, the Ramones actually got some T-shirts made, because they made their own T-shirts. All the early Ramones T-shirts from the 70s were all personally made by them and by Arturo. That's how they really earned their money. And they had made a Rock and Roll High School T-shirt, but they had spelled school wrong. And I had one, and then it kind of wore out and fell apart. I wish I still had it.
We actually did the live stage show at the Roxy. We did all the backstage stuff at the Whiskey. And we did when the Ramones actually played, it was at the Roxy. And boy, oh boy, you want to talk about, the difference between major league hitting and minor league hitting. There's just the Ramones had it. The Ramones had it. And I was, very appreciative of that. And it was a fun experience.
In the concert scene, as you remember, there's a pinhead on stage. Mike Fennell made sure that the money from the budget paid for that. They continued to use that in their act for years, is what I heard. And also, Russ, didn't you hear this, that Gabba Gabba Hey was like a distorted version of Google Gobble, one of us, one
That's
of us
right.
from Free?
That's right. That was one of Johnny's influences because he was such a film buff. He worked that into one of the songs and it became one of their catchphrases. I was surprised when I turned on MTV shortly after Rock and Roll High School came out, and I saw a video for the Rock and Roll High School song, and it was completely different than anything in the movie. And to this day, I don't know why they made that short and didn't use stuff from the movie. I don't understand how that got made.
And the principal's a guy in drag, and it just doesn't work. I don't know why they would have had Allan do it, because Allan did music videos. I think
Phil Spector must have had something to do with it. They were working on that sound, that album around that time. So, but I just don't know why they didn't use stuff from the movie and try and promote the movie on MTV. Doesn't make sense to me.
I do remember after the movie was filmed, but maybe you already know this, Mike, is that there was the Ramones held a concert. I think it was at the Roxy on Sunset. Oh no, it was the Rainbow Room. What was on Sunset? The Roxy or the Rainbow Room? I can't remember. Do you remember, Ross?
The Roxy and it was the Whiskey, the Roxy, and the Rainbow.
The Roxy was on Santa Monica, and the Rainbow was on anyways, I can't remember. It was one on Sunset, and the Ramones did a concert, and I remember Moon Martin was the warm-up group. Russ, you came wearing a Beethoven T-shirt with a safety pin through Beethoven's nose. So the Ramones did this concert. I think I sent you a link. We have the concert. That's the audio of it. And
oh wow!
And Joey says, "Hey everybody, we just did a movie, and I want to be sedated." And then after the concert, which was amazing, it was like in a little small kind of space, I remember Joey grabbed my arm, and he says, "I want you to meet somebody." And he takes me over, and there's Phil Spector sitting there in the dark wearing sunglasses. He goes, I want you to meet Phil. And I want you to meet Phil. And as I'm walking over, I see Phil Spector, and I go, oh, my God, what am I going to say to this guy? Is it true you kept your wife hostage for 10 years? No, I probably shouldn't say that. Is it true you fired a gun at John Lennon's head? No, I probably shouldn't say that either. Hi, I'm a big fan. It's like, fortunately he didn't shoot me. The weakest handshake I've ever felt, that's for sure. So I got to meet Phil Spector, Joey Ramone, and Grady Sutton.
The Ramones concert. I think it was such a great, fun, different kind of music, and I've always been a lover of music. I played saxophone all through high school and college, so I have a musical background. It was, so much fun to do the concert and to look for camera angles and all of that. I would have to say that the concerts that we did were something that stands out in my mind. And then I guess the musical numbers, the musical number in the gym, which was so, again, stylized, that it was fun. I have always wanted to do another real musical. And I think Rock and Roll High School is as close as I came to doing one of those that was also just a, zany comedy.
Another fun scene was the gym scene. That was really a lot of fun. And it was close to the end of the shoot, and Allan just kind of, I think, out of exhaustion, at one point I thought he had like a mini heart attack or something like that, but I think it was just he collapsed out of exhaustion. And so he didn't even show up to set one day. And it was the big gym scene when we had to do all this dancing and everything like that. And Joe Dante came in and he directed that day. And it was a lot of fun. I don't really remember. We must have had a choreographer, but I don't remember. So, but it was, that was great.
Boy, that last day, Joe Dante filled in for Allan because I think he really had a panic attack, and they just rushed him to the hospital because he got to the set that day and realized he had that huge scene to shoot, and he was just overwhelmed with, oh my God, am I going to get it done? We can't shoot tomorrow. This is it.
Joe did a terrific job stepping in when Allan got sick and directing The Cold. He had no idea what that scene was like with PJ and the dancing to Rock and Roll High School in the gym. They came in, they had some vague ideas of the shots, and they said, okay, let's go. This is a Roger Corman film. We got to start shooting right now. And they did, and he just handled it perfectly. It doesn't look at all like it's out of place, like someone else was rushed in at the last minute to do it. It seems like an integral part of the movie that was well worked out beforehand, but it was shot on the fly. So that credits to Joe. He really did a terrific job stepping into that. PJ was very concerned at the time because she was expecting this was going to be her big scene, and she was, working on with Allan. And when Allan got sick, she thought she was devastated. She thought this scene's going to be terrible now. But Joe really stepped in and did a terrific job on it.
Just don't look too close because that's a real high school gymnastics team. A little bit difference in age between PJ and the two Riffettes and the real, actually.
That's right. The kids were 14. She was 29.
You know what? Once again, here Russ and I in my kitchen were writing, what's the stupidest, corniest song? And we had just referenced this in that script we wrote in New York with our buddy Jeff Couchman, Alley Cat. We thought that's just the dorkiest song. And they used it perfectly in the girls' gym class scene, which was, just perfect. The shooting was just a gas, just a lot of fun.
Probably one of the hardest scenes was the little dance choreography scene in front of the Ramones between me and Vince. He picks me up, and that was kind of an embarrassing moment. He could barely pick me up. I was like going, come on, I'm not that heavy. But I think you know what? I think my blue pants might have split or something. I think because I had these really tight blue pants on or something, and I was like, oh God.
Vince Van Patten, he was a very nice guy at the time when we were shooting. During breaks in the movie, we would go in the back of the truck, either the prop truck or the truck for the lighting and stuff like that, and we'd play poker. And years later, he shows up, doing this World of Poker thing, and I thought, yeah, that makes sense. We knew at the time that he really liked that.
So, Russ, did you lose money to Vince Van Patten playing poker?
I did, but a year later, well, I have two further Vince incidents. I went to see the Hollywood Christmas parade, And who's walking down the middle of the parade but his father, Dick Van Patten, in a car, and his son's behind him. And Vince was there with his tennis racket. He was also a tennis player, a professional tennis player. So I run out into the parade, and I start walking beside Vince. I go, Vince, how are you? And he goes, hey, how you doing? And so I had a flask with me. So we walked the entire parade drinking from this flask of whiskey. So by the time we got to the end of the parade, he said, don't let my dad see that I'm drinking. Okay. So by the time we were stumbling around at the end of the parade now, it was Boulevard, very cold, but very warm inside by the liquor. So we had a good time. I met him another time. I'm not going to say the story because it's not going to be. If it's going to be broadcast, I don't want to say the story. But I'll tell you it later privately if you want to hear it, Mike.
I enjoyed working with him. He was very sweet. He and Clint, and I was really the novice on the. I just had the least experience, and I was the youngest and like the newcomer, and they all were great. We just all played our roles, and we had a good time, and I really enjoyed working with him. I enjoyed working with Clint. I've stayed in touch with both PJ and Clint. I haven't talked to Clint in a while. Vince I saw once at one interview. And Mary Woronov, PJ and myself and Mary, we go to conventions all across the country when they request Rock and Roll High School, and we sign autographs and do interviews and stuff like that.
Vince, I got along great with Vince. And I had known Vince, growing up in the business. There was at one point in our lives, we were working on 2 separate television series, one stage apart. So we would see each other all the time, sort of, in the alley of the studio and going to and fro, studio school and this and that. And I had known Vince, and he was just the right guy for that part. And I'd never met Dey, and I'd never met PJ, but it was fun to have peers around. It was fun to have people, that I could relate to.
So, of course, you're going to ask me what did I think of the Ramones, like everyone asks. And my experience of them was they were really harmless. I think they were very foreign creatures, very quiet to themselves, loved to eat pizza, like it's portrayed in the movie. I'm sure Allan told you that he had to take a lot of the dialogue away from them because they had a lot larger roles, speaking roles. And the only one who could really do any of the speaking was John, and he would just kind of throw lines here and there. Basically, they were just very quiet and to themselves and had a hard time with the dialogue, so their dialogue was all minimized. They really stayed to themselves, but they were very nice, and I've gone and done a few benefits for Johnny's cause at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery, raising money for prostate cancer and stuff.
So it was interesting, and but I really liked them. They were genuinely cool guys. Johnny was the one that I conversed with the most. Joey was extremely shy. I don't remember Marky saying much, although I see him all the time now at conventions, and we usually sit next to each other. They put our tables together, and we take a lot of pictures with the fans together, so it's kind of ironic. And then Dee Dee would just say some crazy thing to me that I had no idea what he was saying. But for the most part, I was really busy because I was pretty much in every scene, and I was sort of preoccupied with, and I was really, really wanting to make this, since it was a leading role, I wanted to make this also, my last teenage role, because by then I was 28 years old, so I was like, okay, this has got to be it here. Back then you could get away with it. For the most part, I kind of dragged them to the lunch line because they'd call for lunch, and then they wouldn't want to break in front of the extras. I go, no, you guys are in the next scene. You can eat. It's okay. These are the extras. And they're like, well, it's okay. We'll just wait. Or, I don't know if we're going to like what they have there. And so they were really endearing and really cute, and would never sit on the couch in the dressing rooms or whatever. They'd always sit on the floor. I'd be like, guys, you're allowed to sit on the furniture. You're stars of this movie. I did invite them to my house for Thanksgiving, but they ended up where they didn't really eat Thanksgiving dinner, turkey and mashed potatoes and stuff. So we did order pizza, so that is a true story. The pizza was a real thing, which is, I think, why it was in the movie. I mean, obviously Allan had to draw from their real lives, so.
Well, I became friends with John. I mean, I didn't see him all the time, but we were very friendly. And it was, to really see guys that could do it was very impressive to me. Marky, the drummer at the time, and I never really got to know Joey. Joey was sort of an elusive, enigmatic figure.
They were early in their career, of course. For them, it was the same thing. It was like they just loved making music, doing rock and roll, and I think they were kind of delighted the fact that they were an integral part of the movie. They were the sort of the focus of the plot, you might say. Actually, I found it was quite easy. I mean, it was great fun, and Joey was especially interesting, I think, as a character, but as a musician.
Allan assigned Russ and I to help the Ramones run lines with them. And we would go into the trailer, because there was only one Winnebago. I think Dee Dee and Marky were, at least Dee Dee was kind of usually passed out. And there's a rumor, and maybe you've heard this, Russ, is that Dee Dee went to the ER so many times during the shoot that he kept on wearing the hospital wristbands that you can see him in the movie. I don't know if that's true.
I haven't heard that, no. But, I have to say that certainly the most approachable Ramones at the time was Johnny, because he seemed very interested in the movie because of his own interest in the movies. He was around more than the other ones. He didn't retire as much as Joey and the other ones. Joey was very shy.
Sweet guy, Joey.
On the set, he was very sweet, but really, Johnny was the one who was the most willing to talk to people and just having a normal conversation with.
Although every once in a while you feel like he might be able to punch us out like any time.
He always had that look like at any moment he could clock you if he wanted to, but he never did.
Absolutely.
First of all, the Ramones were so cool. They did whatever we wanted them to. They were not snobby at all. And plus, the idea that a girl writes a song for the Ramones, and then she dreams about them, and then they come to her school or whatever, and then she dreams another dream where she's I think she's sleeping in bed, and they appear in her bedroom, and she goes in the shower, and there's Joey Ramone. I mean, that's such a great scene. It just had some really classic, great scenes.
Without the Ramones, I'm not sure that this movie remembered at all, certainly not as finely as it is right now. It really places the movie at a certain time. There's no other movie like it with the Ramones. They did other, appearances and stuff, but this is the only thing that they have in a commercial movie that they made. So it's the only thing that's available. And their stature has just grown tremendously ever since the 80s. I mean, it just keeps going. You hear their music commercials all the time now. So I think one of the reasons for that is because of the popularity of the Ramones and showing audiences that they could be more than just these. Well, that punk could be. Their image is so iconic that it's just part of America. Without the Ramones, let's say it was Cheap Trick, I'm not sure the movie would be remembered like it is today. The Ramones bring so much to it.
Although the movie might have been more popular in its initial release because of the Cheap Trick Live at Budokan album, but I think it has it doesn't date as with the Ramones. They're kind of timeless, as you said, Russ. But wait a second, that's only 3.
I have to say it. I think the fourth reason why the movie is still remembered is because of our screenplay. We saw the screenplay they had before, and believe me, it was not memorable. We did the job that Allan wanted to do. He had a vision about social commentary about the movie, and that was not what we were hired for, because he already had that down. What we were hired for is to create a credible storyline and put gags and fun in the movie. And that's what we did. And I think that's one of the reasons why it got so much play in cult moviedom, play midnight shows. At that time, there were 3 or 4 midnight shows that played everywhere. The Pink Flamingos, Eraserhead, Rocky Horror Picture Show, and Rock and Roll High School. It played every big city that had a revival theater played at midnight, every city. I think one of the reasons for that is because the screenplay had something to say about something that everyone really hated, which was high school life. And so they like to see the kids taking over the school. And we did it in such a, it's a strange, if you just told someone, well, it's about these kids who take over a school and blow it up, it's not, well, that's not funny. but we were able to make it funny. So I think that was a good effort on our part. I think people remember the screenplay as being a funny, the movie as being a funny movie, and that's because of with my script.
I would agree, but also Allan let us make it like a live-action cartoon because we would reference Frank Tashlin and the Three Stooges and stuff, and so we kind of made it a living cartoon, and Allan was fine with that, and we kind of bonded with Allan on that sensibility. He kind of let us go crazy, and every once in a while he would pull us back, but as I said, working with Allan was an absolute dream.
You can see all the influences in the movie that we had in our lives, the Three Stooges, even Bob Hope, Jerry Lewis, Tashlin, Woody Allen, yeah. So it really was, it reflected what we were doing at the time. And Allan let us do that. No one else ever did it since. Allan really let us have our head and do what we wanted to do.
A couple really cool things happened, Mike, is that the part that Grady Sutton eventually played, we were trying to think of people to play it. And Russ and I suggested Joe Besser. Remember the Three Stooges? Not so hard, right? Okay, so my memory is that, Russ, you and I called the Besser household.
That's right. He happened to live only a few blocks from where we lived in North Hollywood. So we called up, and his wife answered the phone, as I recall, and we said, is this Joe Besser's house? He goes, yes. Joe Besser, the Three Stooges? She says, yes. Oh, can we talk to Joe? He goes, well, Joe's next door to barbecue, so he's not really available right now.
Joe decided not to accept it because wouldn't he lose part of his pension or his health insurance or something? And so Allan and Mike tracked down Grady Sutton, and it's like, oh my God. And so here he is. It's like Grady Sutton, and I remember Russ and I said, oh my God, we loved you in The Bank Dick. And I think there was a long pause. I was in The Bank Dick, right? And I remember in a signature of his that says, to Richard, don't buy beefsteak mines, which of course is what him and W.C. Fields concoct the scheme on in The Bank Dick. I've had people say, I don't know if I'm more impressed that you met the Ramones or Grady's, but he's terrific in that short scene.
Yeah, he was great, yeah.
He knew how to do a take. And I remember Russ's and my joke, Mike, was that when Grady, he was pretty old then, when Grady Sutton passes away, I hope that his obituary is something like Grady Sutton was in My Man Godfrey, The Bank Dick, My Fair Lady, and Rock and Roll High School. And it wasn't far from that, actually. Not that Rock and Roll High School deserves it, those other three, but anyway, that was a thrill for us, a thrill and a half. And to think, I'm sure Allan told you that it was like $280,000, which was, I think it was originally $300,000, but then they took $20,000 out of the budget, and I think a lot of that was taken out of the catering. And the joke on the set was, if you don't eat it today, it's quiche tomorrow, because they would just put all the leftovers into a pie pan and make it.
The food was terrible. There wasn't any. The set was always trashed. We practically blew up the high school. The hours were horrible. No, I love the shoot. Are you kidding? I was, I don't know if you should say this, but everybody was high. So was I. I had a great time. Who wanted to go to sleep?
The screening was one of the best screenings I ever went to when they had the cast and crew screening. Normally there usually is good vibes in screening like that, but this one was off the charts. I mean, everyone really, really enjoyed the film, and they were very pleased with the way it turned out.
And Allan made sure that there was 1950s health educational hygiene movies that showed beforehand, which set the tone perfectly. But I do remember an earlier screening of Rock and Roll High School, which was like a rough cut, and it was like 2.5 hours long. It was everything of our script, just everything. It was way over 2 hours long. And I remember John Landis was there, and, soliciting advice, who I became friends with John, a very nice guy. But I remember after the screening, Allan asked Russ and I, what do you think? And I said, perfect, don't change a thing. This movie should be 2.5 hours long. Why not? It was everything.
I remember that, and it's too bad we lost the shower scene. Now, why did we lose the shower scene? Was this too risque, or what was going on there?
Well, here's what it was, Mike. So You have to remember Eagle-Bauer. This is kind of a dated joke, but he had the coupon books. He would sell coupon books to students, and it was like, in those days, that's what Disneyland did. You had the coupons, right? There's a line of students wearing Vince Lombardi High School gym clothes. I still have the T-shirt with the green pants with the gold piping. And Russ, I was in there as an extra, but so was Russ as the freshman, and a cameo by Ron Howard, Clint's brother. And we're all outside, and Eagle-Bauer is going to charge us all because I think it was called Freshmen of the Caribbean or something, instead of Pirates of the Caribbean. It was just this, the tickets of the Disneyland ticket joke. And so we would all have to step up, give him our ticket that we had to pay for, and then look in the window of the girls' locker room.
Yeah, well, Ron Howard had an association with Roger because he directed Grand Theft Auto, and of course they also had no association because Clint his brother was in the movie, so he did a cameo for us. And it's too bad we lost him in that shot.
Absolutely, I wish I don't think that footage exists anywhere. That, along with the opening of Sunset Boulevard in Rock and Roll High School, I think those are the two footage that everyone wants to see. Oh, and the gas chamber scene at the end of Double Indemnity. Yeah, that's it. Those are the big three. The experience of Rock and Roll High School is like one of the best of my life. As Russ was saying, we got completely spoiled because Allan was just so amazing and forthcoming and giving and just wanting us to be involved on every single level. It was just terrific. But I remember that screening. That screening was on a theater on Motor in Culver City that's no longer there anymore. And my memory is Devo was at the screening. Does that sound right, Russ?
Don't remember that, no.
I don't remember that either. I kind of remember. I thought it was. If you go on IMDb, there's a credit given to James Cameron that he was a production assistant, but I don't think anyone can confirm that.
Yeah, I don't remember him being on the set because he was busy. He was doing Badly on the Stars, or at least preparing for it at that time. I don't think he may have showed up for a day or so, but he was not really associated with the film as a.
So the night it opened in Los Angeles, Mike, it opened in a double feature with the movie The Kids Are All Right, a documentary about The Who, which, if I'm not mistaken, was also being released by New World, Roger's company. And so Russ and I said, this is our first world premiere. And so not only are we going to eat dinner at Musso and Frank's, the legendary Hollywood restaurant where writers like Ben Hecht and everyone used to go in the 30s, but Russ and I went to Hollywood Costume and rented a top hat and tails and a cane. And we went and had dinner at Musso's, like the legendary writers did, and we walked down Hollywood Boulevard wearing a top hat and cane, and to see the movie, the premiere. I mean, there was no Klieg lights or anything, but it was great, because what the heck, you only have your first premiere once, and so that was pretty special. And that night when we were signing autographs for 2 hours, I can't tell you how many people, because Russ and I were the last ones in line, the way it was set up, they would say, I'm a writer because of this movie. This is like my favorite movie. This movie influenced me. And it's like, whoa, it was so touching. And then, of course, one 20-something-year-old girl said, would you sign my breast? Which was kind of my only Mick Jagger moment of my life. So that was kind of nice.
Rock and Roll High School was a gateway for our career because a lot of people in the movie business really liked it, and so we got a lot of work off of it for many years. And even when people didn't know that we wrote Rock and Roll High School, when they found out, they go, "Oh yeah, I remember. Yeah, that was a big influence on me." For the executives in the studio we were talking to. So it really was an important step in our career. If we hadn't had that movie made, we had that credit, who knows what would have happened.
Absolutely. And a friend of mine, here this movie barely gets released. It's released in a double feature, for God's sakes.
Outside the preview, we had a sneak preview of the movie. It had gone over extremely well, and that was completely by luck. It was playing on a real cheap theater on Hollywood Boulevard, and by our happenstance, a bunch of people from the punk rock scene in L.A. had shown up at the theater because they wanted to see some movies on a cheap night. And they walked in, and out of nowhere, these guys are like 10 or 15 of them. Imagine sitting in a movie theater and they say there's a sneak preview, and you're a punker in L.A. in 1978, and on comes a movie about the Ramones, with the Ramones in it, you know. So obviously they went a little crazy and loved it. And I was accused of stacking the house. You know, we were kind of a little outside between myself and not so much Roger, but Roger's head of distribution, who did not like the movie at all. It's the guy who sort of books it in the theaters. He really didn't like the movie. And I don't think he liked me much. You know, Roger had given me notes about cutting down the scenes between Kate and Riff in the bedroom. You know, they talk about pizza and all that stuff. They wanted me to cut that scene in half, shorten it. And I said that scene was really important because the relationships form there, and the fact that you spend time with those characters make you understand so much of what she believes in, so that when the principal sets the albums on fire, you can understand how this has gone, and her friend joins in to help her. It leads to the kids. You understand why she would want to cause such a rebellion. You know, it's a big jump to take over the school. They listened, Roger actually listened to that, and then they said there's too much of the Ramones in it. They would actually take out some of the references. Can you cut the songs in half? There's too many songs. And that was really a scary moment because I didn't want to do that. The picture, when it opened, didn't do well, and this topic came up again. And the only reason that I wasn't forced to do it because of how much it would have cost. Because we couldn't cut the opera track. We would have had to gone in and remix the movie. The distribution got backed off, and they just kept saying, it's like a commercial for the Ramones. And I said, the only reason a large part of our audience is going to go see this movie is because they're Ramones fans. You know, we have an album out, and that's going to come out, and we have an obligation to the record company. They put up $25,000. You know, and basically they backed off. And of course, obviously now, it would have been the movie that didn't do right by the Ramones. That's what I kept saying. There's nothing I hated more. I said when I was a kid was when you'd show a band and they'd be late, you know, or you promise something and you only give kids half of it. We have the whole thing here, so we should do it. Basically, I kind of won that argument. So nothing actually changed after the preview.
Back then, it took a long time for Rock and Roll High School to be seen. I don't even think it was really seen that much in the industry, and it took a while. You know, it was played in the art houses, I think, you know, probably in New York City on the A Street Playhouse and New Art and L.A. It just wasn't a widely released picture, you know, and it took a long time to get sort of cult status.
Siskel and Ebert, when they had At the Movie still on PBS, gave it a big review, and Roger Ebert said, this should be a midnight movie, like Rocky Horror Picture Show. This should be a cult movie. And it kind of, that helped it a lot. He was always a big fan. I growing up in Chicago, I read his reviews all the time. I actually called him up, and he took the phone call, and he was very nice. And I saw him at a restaurant once years later, and I introduced myself, and I go, you gave my movie a great review. I want to say thank you. And he said, what movie? I said, Rock and Roll High School. He goes, I love that movie, directed by Allan Arkush. I go, yeah. And Roger said, hey, you should meet a friend of mine. This is Russ Meyer. I swear to God, Russ Meyer said, you were Rock and Roll High School, and I go, you didn't, you know, Battle of the Super Vixens, come on. It's like, you know, Rock and Roll High School, you know, it's, Russ, before he came on, I was saying about, I think maybe you heard some of it, that in film school we read about these small, low-budget B movies that are now elevated by critics to the level of art to be studied. And to read articles about Rock and Roll High School that are flattering in that kind of cinematic way it's just an odd feeling. It's complimentary. I love it, but it's just, you know, this little $280,000 movie, you know, is still remembered. I'm just thrilled beyond belief.
Danny Perry did a book called Cult Movies, and he said it was the only American film, American commercial film in which a major American institution is destroyed and nobody gets punished. So he thought it was very subversive in that sense. And, you know, you couldn't do this ending today. You would be, you know, I mean, after Columbine and everything, you couldn't get away with this kind of ending. But it was a more innocent time. We didn't think that people would actually do things like this. I mean, it was kind of a fantasy. The idea of blowing up a high school just seemed completely unreal, but it was a fantasy, and it was effective in the film.
We're both very proud of it. We worked very hard on it, and everyone worked very hard on it, and it still holds up today, so we're very pleased by it.
I'm very proud of it. I'm very happy to have been involved, and I'm thrilled that it keeps coming back in different DVD editions. And for a long time, it was, when Roger released the film, he didn't know what to do with it. He didn't realize it was a special kind of film, and he just dumped it on the drive-in and neighborhood circuit like he did with any of his films. And one of the things I'm proud of is that one of the theaters where it opened was the Texas Theater in Oak Cliff, which is a suburb of Dallas. This is where Lee Harvey Oswald was captured. And so the film had its world premiere at that theater, and among others. But it died immediately because it was this strange, unusual film, and, so it kind of disappeared right away. And after about a year, Siskel and Ebert, and I thank them a lot for doing this, they gave it a good review, and they said it was terrific. And some theater in Chicago started playing it as a midnight cult film, which is really the way to sell that kind of film. But, back then they hadn't quite figured that thing out. The whole cult midnight movie thing became a big deal after that. So it played for a year in Chicago, and other cities started playing it like that, and it caught on. It was never going to be a big commercial success. Just like the Ramones were not a big commercial success, they were a cult band. They couldn't get their records played on most radio stations because their material was too subversive and strange. They did songs about child abuse and about glue sniffing and things like that. And when they tried to go mainstream, they flopped. So it was always a cult film, but that gives it a certain cachet and a certain guerrilla feeling to it. And I keep running into students who say it's their favorite film, and I hope they're telling me the truth. So over the years, it acquired quite a following. It became the first feature film that ever played MTV in its entirety. The problem with that, although that was great, no theater would show it after that because it had already shown on TV. So the film kind of disappeared for a long time, and then the home video revolution came along, and it started coming out on, well, it took a long time to come out on VHS for some reason. I'm not sure why. It was missing for a few years, but on DVD, it's been successful for a long time, one edition after another, and they did a kind of restoration a few years ago. It looks really terrific. It's doing very well for Roger. He had a reggae movie called The Harder They Come that was a surprise hit, and he called it My New Harder They Come. That was his take on it. So it's been a good moneymaker for him, and I got royalty checks for like 25 years on the film. Not a lot of money, but it was nice to get checks. And then for a while he stopped paying, and I got the Writers Guild to make him cough up again. But he keeps making money off it.
To promote the Blu-ray, the release of the Blu-ray, Mike, maybe you know this story. They screen Rock and Roll High School sometimes at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery here in town, on the side of a huge mausoleum, not where people are sitting on top of graves, but they have like screenings at the cemetery, where it gets dark in the summer and people party and everything, and they got the food trucks and everything. So they showed Rock and Roll High School, and they had Mary was there and everyone was there, and they had a live podcast, I think, where Russ and I were interviewed. And so before it got dark, they had a long table where Russ and Lauren Lester and PJ and Dey Young and Tommy Ramone and Dean Cundey and Mary Woronov, and we all lined up on the table to sign autographs, and we did it for almost 2 hours. And
that's right. The line was incredibly long. I couldn't believe it. Well, this movie, there's always revivals and specials on the movie. So if Whit wanted to, he'd go to 3 or 4 or 5 of these every year. People are get together and discuss the movie, either in showings in revival theaters or some other celebration like Johnny's.
Johnny Ramone's Cancer Fund promotes some of these every once in a while.
That's right. It was on his birthday. So really, people still remember this movie very fondly. You can't imagine the number of times Whitley and I, both together and individually, in the strangest places, on a train, at the workplace, when people start asking you personal questions, well, I used to be in the movie business. I wrote Rock and Roll High School. I can't believe it. That was my favorite film growing up. And even among younger kids now, they see it on the discs and on TV. But it used to be on MTV a lot, so they remember from then too. So it still holds sway for a lot of people, and it's still very important to them. So, and that's a big surprise to us. We never thought it would play out past the summer that it opened. When it opened not very well. I mean, it didn't make very much money. So it really gained momentum over time.
I know they did another Rock and Roll High School, but it didn't do as well. And I think maybe Mary Woronov was in it. She told me it was terrible. So I don't know.
I remember when that movie was going into production, I contacted the producer or director. Said, listen, if you're going to make a sequel to this movie, you need to know there's 3 things. I didn't have Russ's list of 4 in front of me. I said there's 3 things that made Rock and Roll High School successful, and that's Allan Arkush, PJ Soles, and the Ramones. If you don't have one of those 3, it's not going to be successful. You're not going to make a good movie. You need one of those 3.
They didn't take your advice, apparently.
They did not. And I think that's when Corey Feldman got arrested for heroin during the shooting of that movie.
That's right, yeah.
But I started to watch the movie, and I've never finished it. And actually, Joe Dante gave me a VHS copy, and he said he couldn't finish it. And so maybe he did have a story by credit. I don't know. But I remember starting to watch it. Did you guys ever see Airplane 2? And you're 20 minutes in and go, that's kind of exactly the same as what they did before, but not really. It was like weird deja vu. And that's what it had at the beginning, but I don't think... Is anyone in both movies?
Mary Woronov's in both.
Does she play Miss Togar?
No, she's Dr. Vader.
Oh, see, Dr. Vader. Hello.
Yeah, to this day I've never seen it, so I don't know.
You're one of the few actresses or actors that came back for Rock and Roll High School Forever. How did you get involved in that one?
They hired me and paid me money. Also, I have to say that everybody was on a schedule, and you made your whatever. You were there. You were on set. It was entirely different. It was very, very businesslike, very clean. And the wonderful thing is, Hollywood can do anything. I mean, I had to think up my own stunts in the first movie. In the second movie, they said, Miss Woronov, you have this iron claw which can do anything. How would you like to? What if you just did this and lit your cigarette with it? I said, can you do that? You're kidding. And they go, oh, yes. They took it away for 5 minutes. It came back, and there was a cigarette lighter in my finger. I mean, it was amazing what they could do. I mean, I had to do a pratfall. I said, I just can't do this. They go, oh, no, you can. And they make it so easy. Hollywood is a fabulous place. They can make anything happen.
Oh, here's the cool thing. So, because of Rock and Roll High School, you probably know that the man who created the mouse was inside the giant costume is Rob Bottin. Russ and I were brought on to come up with an idea for Rob being costume and special effects expert to direct a movie. And my memory is, Russ, we came up with this out of whole cloth, or was this given to us? But Russ's and my idea, because they wanted Paul and Mary, is that we came up, you have to remember this is 1980. So we came up with, or 79, the big broadcast of 1999. And it was going to be the premise of the Bob Hope movie, the big broadcast. And so in 1999, it's a race to the moon, ocean liner race to the moon. But it's a sleek spaceship. The sleek futuristic spaceship is run by Mary and Paul. They're going to win the race. The challenger, the underdog, they've retrofitted the Queen Mary. And the Queen Mary is now a spaceship where the smokestacks are sticking out of this clear plastic bubble that it's in, right? And what's going to happen is that in this race to the moon is that we find out that the Queen Mary's secret power source is rock and roll. we needed an excuse, like in the big broadcast, to have rock acts do cameos and stuff. So we were going to have nonstop rock and roll acts funneling and giving the power to the ship. And at night when everyone's asleep, it was a series of Elvis impersonators that would sing one song and pass out, and then, But the head waiter on board the Queen Mary is the original head waiter from the old days of the ship, going to be played by Hunts Hall. And his grandson, this is what Russ and I envisioned, and his grandson was going to be played by Rick Nielsen of Cheap Trick, because Cheap Trick loved Rock and Roll High School, still wanted to work with us, and we all got together, and it was going to be Cheap Trick, and they're like an unknown band. They're going to sneak on the Queen Mary because his grandfather was going to sneak him on.
I'm glad I'm not the only one that thought that those guys looked so similar.
That's absolutely, yes. And it's too bad
it was a fun idea.
We had a couple of meetings on it, and then it just disappeared. I don't know why.
We did a whole treatment on it.
Mike, have you ever heard of a band called the Rizzillos? Okay, they were a band out of Glasgow, Scotland, and when the Ramones toured England, they were the band with them. And they were a really, really good band that was part punk and part pop. That's another example of work I got from Rock and Roll High School. Allan was somehow associated with these two producers, and they wanted to come up with a movie called Bikini Space Party. So I wrote the movie Bikini Space Party. We tried to get this band in it, and the financing fell through. But that's just one example of how Rock and Roll High School really set in motion the career for both of us. I mean, we really got a lot of work just from that one move. That's how I got Rock and Roll Hotel. One guy said, the Rock and Roll High School, why don't we get the guy who wrote Rock and Roll Hotel, Rock and Roll High School to write this script? They said, okay. So that's how I got the call, only because of Rock and Roll High School.
And you know what? The independent film industry was not as revered then. I mean, Roger Corman was still making B movies. And a friend of mine who's a fan of the film said, if Rock and Roll High School was made today, you'd be nominated for an Independent Spirit Award. Which is, kind of funny, but why the hell not,
I know that Howard Stern might have the rights to the next one or something. I heard he got the rights for a couple of movies like Porky's, and his two favorite movies was like Porky's and Rock and Roll High School or something, and he got the rights for both of those. So he hasn't done anything yet with them that I know of.
There's rumors now that Howard Stern wants to remake the movie, and I'm sure you guys, we've all heard that, but honestly, in this post-Columbine 9/11 world, is blowing up a high school still going to be relevant? It has such different connotations, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Is anyone still going to be able to do a movie like that's such a cartoon? We have a giant mouse wearing an apron that says, "I hate mousework." That's, worried that her children are exploding in the school. It's just a little bit of a cartoon, and to say the least. And and there's a rock band called Exploding White Mice. A friend of mine sent me the album, and all it had was attached to it was a Post-it and says, "See what you've done." This has been a gas, Mike. This has just been terrific.
I tried to give you some different stuff than is available normally.
Something about Evelyn Togar just always does it for me, so I don't know if it's the outfit or what.
I would be careful of your sex life then.
Let's take a look now at a cheerful new contender for cult status. It's hard to predict where the cult film audience is going to turn next, because after all, cult fans specialize in staying out of step with everyone else, but there is one new film this year that does seem to have a chance of breaking into the cult big time. It's a cheap but lively little musical called Rock and Roll High School. It's already been successful at midnight shows in Chicago and Toronto, and it embraces the favorite message of all cult films, which is down with the establishment. Rock and Roll High School stars a punk rock group called the Ramones, and the funny thing is the look and sound of the singers in the Ramones seems to have been partly inspired by none other than the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Will Rock and Roll High School be the next cult classic? Gene, I think that's what you're predicting, right?
Yes, I know the kids are going to like the scene where they burn down the high school. I also think this is one of those rock and roll will never die films. Those have been popular for 20 years. But I'm a little bit nervous. You're 37, I'm 33. Here we are, people slightly over 21 recommending cult films. I don't know. Do we know what we're talking about?
Are you saying if this program recommends Rock and Roll High School, that's the kiss of death?
In a way, maybe, because I don't think the people who go to cult films want to have them picked for them by somebody else. They want to discover them their own.
So if you like Rock and Roll High School, you didn't hear it here first.
Okay.
Rock, 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 rock and roll high school. But I don't care about history. Rock, rock, rock and roll high school. 'Cause that's not where I wanna be. Rock, rock, rock and roll high school. I just wanna have some kicks. I just wanna get some chicks. Rock, 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 rock and roll high school. Well, the girls out there knock out, you know. Rock, rock, rock and roll high school. Cruising around in my GTO. Rock, rock, rock and roll high school. But I don't like the teachers and the principal. Don't wanna be taught to be no fool. Rock, 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 rock and roll high school. Rock, 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 rock and roll high school. Fun, fun, 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 oh baby. Fun, fun, oh baby. Fun, fun, rock, 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 rock and roll high school. Rock, 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 rock and roll high school. Rock, rock, rock.
We're back, and thanks to that whole raft of guests for taking the time to talk to us about Rock and Roll High School. And there's some bonus interviews over at our website, projection-booth.com, if you want to hear some more, and you can check out those. But for now, we're talking about Rock and Roll High School. And like any good idea, sometimes there are sequels. And in this case, there's a couple of films that kind of tie back into Rock and Roll High School. And, well, I mean, obviously there is Rock and Roll High School forever. But let's talk about some of these films that are connected in here, Mr. Mike.
So, what did folks think of Rock and Roll Hotel? Why did I pick Rock and Roll Hotel to be talked about in this? Well, two reasons. It's got a very similar title, Rock and Roll High School versus Rock and Roll Hotel, and one of the co-writers was Russ Dvonch, who was the co-writer on Rock and Roll High School. So I was thinking there was going to be a real connection between the two, like Rock and Roll Hotel was kind of a sequel to Rock and Roll High School. No. Definitely not a sequel. I think the similarities kind of end at the title, but my God, Rock and Roll Hotel. I know, Adam, that you are a huge fan of this movie.
Very true. The first thing I noticed, I knew I was in for a treat, was when I played the link, and the first thing I saw was that the video was tracking. So I appreciate that it was actually scanned from a VHS and a really, really beat up VHS. That was perfect.
Well, let's just take a minute to reminisce about tracking. When was the last time you saw tracking? I mean, it was like visiting an old friend. It's like, oh, tracking. Oh, how I've missed you.
Exactly. Like what did they used to do to fit on like several movies onto one VHS? They would stretch the tape.
You could use
SLP.
Yes, SLP. This was a pan and scan, wasn't it?
Oh, God. I don't even think it was pan and scan. I think it was just full frame right in the middle of the frame. So however it was transferred, I don't think there was any kind of effort put in to show you either side of the frame, because it was just dead center on what was probably a widescreen, or at least a 1.85 to 1. And yeah, you were missing a lot of picture information here.
Yeah, there was a lot of two shots in there that ended up being half of it, each face on the edge of the screen.
Well, I can't help but think it all worked to its advantage. But I do think that Rachel Sweet is pretty cute.
This, to me, was like a Rachel Sweet vanity project, because she is all over this movie. She's like the musical coordinator. She sings. She acts. It is produced or co-produced by someone named Richard Sweet.
I think Richard Sweet actually might be her father.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that was her father, or her husband, or her brother, or her sister's neighbor, whatever it was. But yeah, it seems like there was a connection there. And she's the star of the show, man.
I'm pretty sure she wrote all the songs, too. Lyrics and music, etc.
Oh, yeah, she helped co-write a lot of the songs, and I had no idea who Rachel Sweet was, and then I was looking up her Wikipedia entry, and my God, she's been all over the place. She has done just a ton of stuff, and she's still working today. She's like producer on Hot in Cleveland, that Betty White show, and before that, she was all over, and she had a record deal and has all these singles out for years. She sang on the Hairspray soundtrack, which we'll talk a little bit more about Hairspray in a little bit here. So yeah, she has had a fairly major career, and I had no idea who she was.
I think if Mike, if you read all the way to the end of that Wikipedia entry, you'll note that perhaps the most interesting factoid is that she actually had owned and since sold a house previously owned by Madonna for like $5 million or something. So she's probably sitting on a nice little pile of cash.
Yeah, and I don't think it was Rock and Roll Hotel money.
Oh, no.
Well, I wanted to bring up first that this movie was shot in Richmond, Virginia, so there's this whole Richmond connection. Like, if you go out and Google around and stuff, you're going to find all these like kind of articles written about Rock and Roll Hotel from this kind of Richmond angle and everything. So I guess that's Richmond at the opening when she does her voiceover and is like, this is my town. And I do have to say, man, it is like one of the worst voiceovers I've ever heard before. Like, her singing voice is pretty good, but her speaking voice I'm not a big fan of. And that fucking voiceover is just, it doesn't want to end sometimes. And then every once in a while she'll just kind of jump in with a comment over the voiceover. And it's like, no, just stop it. Stop it. Give it to me in the beginning, maybe a little bit at the end. I don't need this constant narration.
There she is, my city. And from every high-rise someday they'll be blasting my songs. There's Johnny. He's the boy who's all know-how. The boy with expertise. Some hunk, huh?
I think often people put in voiceovers after the fact in order to, like a Band-Aid, in order to fix the film. And this was clearly such a mess and so horribly made that it was probably entirely incoherent. Not that the voiceover helped very much. I still couldn't really understand most of the storyline.
Beyond the tracking at the opening, which you said, "Oh, I'm in trouble," there's an error, a very glaring error in the opening, in the credits. I was just like, uh-oh, because it's this freeze frame for no reason that goes into motion with Judd Nelson on the side of the road with a guitar. And it sits there for it's got to be like 10 seconds. And I'm like, why is this still frame? I'm like, why isn't he moving? And it was just bizarre to have that. I just kind of put my antenna up as to this is probably not going to be very good. And then, like you said, that voiceover is pretty bad. And the other thing that I love about the film is that it obviously doesn't deal in reality, at least in the first minute and a half, because after they pick up Judd Nelson, and I was trying to figure out exactly when this was, and you say 83, although the credits say 86, Mike. I thought this was that period, later in the 80s when Judd Nelson's kind of star had fallen a bit, and he was doing all kinds of weird stuff. But there's this scene where they're in the car, and they pick him up, and he's refuses to play. He refuses to play guitar for them. And he sort of turns his back to them and starts playing. And when he does, it's like, man, I didn't know you could get that good a tone with a guitar that's not plugged in. And then she's singing along and no wind noise from that convertible car. It was just amazing.
It is definitely a rock and roll fantasy, if you will. Because, he's got an amp going. And then at one point they bring in trumpets, even though there's no trumpets. And, this is where the drums would go.
If we want to walk down the premise, it's basically there's a radio station where Colin Quinn, which I wrote in my notes, go back to remote control. You were better there during this period.
Colin Quinn's performance in this movie is something to not be believed. He moves his shoulders whenever he talks and stuff. It's almost like he's trying to force the words out of his mouth. It's almost like he has that worm from Poltergeist 2 inside of him, and he's trying to get that out of there or something. It's just like, what are you doing here?
You're listening to radio station WROC, home of the Screaming Bleepers, and HQ to your very own roaming Romeo of the airwaves. Mr. DJ Bodine will be here till dawn.
Okay, let's get a good look right into this rock and roll game.
So buckle up, grab your joy toy, and remember, DJ says rock is a 4-letter word. This next song is a special request for Ozzy's wife, Harriet. Whoa, you remember her. DJ's a close personal friend of that special gal. Also on the line are Trixie Norton, Lucy, and Ethel Mertz. Oh gosh, I could go on and on. Just mention the name Aunt Bate, I still get randy pants. When that hussy wasn't baking pies for Opie, watch out. Remember, all you kids out there in WROC rock and roll land, DJ loves to rock. So if any of you zipperheads have a demo that you think is hot, slam it on down to the Big D, king of the killer radio, and he'll give it a spin. Ooh, doggy.
The radio station that he works at where he's a DJ is going to change from heavy rock to easy listening. And instead of it being an evil principal, it's an evil radio station owner. Of course, another woman school marm type. And then there's this whole thing with Lisa and her band, The Third Dimension, and how they're trying to get to the Rock and Roll High School, or excuse me, the Rock and Roll Hotel, and they're trying to get some press. And there's this, of course, Battle of the Bands, which is a standard cliche in most rock and roll movies, I have to say. So there's all of these sort of like cliches that get piled up on top of each other in this film, and they're kind of poorly executed. And then the copy that we're looking at doesn't look all that good. Like you said, it's basically locked down instead of even pan and scan, so you're missing part of the image, and I don't even know if that would help you. And then at some point, they're interacting with, I don't know, what is that thing? Is it like a animatronic otter or something? What the hell is it?
It's a raccoon. It's like the early version of Rocket Raccoon from the Guardians of the Galaxy.
So if you like the Guardians of the Galaxy, you should watch this movie.
I have no idea why there's a raccoon in the Rock and Roll Hotel, other than maybe he's Rocky Raccoon from the Beatles song or something?
Yes.
Which may be some sort of reference to the life-size mouse that's in the concert scenes of Rock and Roll High School.
At least that, and I'm going to say this out loud, at least that makes sense.
I mean, these kinds of things like that raccoon should have been the result of a very druggy set, and I doubt that I really don't even think that's the case with this movie, though. Who knows?
Heavy Metal Massacre. It's Rock and Roll Hotel look like Citizen Kane. The folks over at outside the cinema will tell you that palette in that movie outacted every actor in that movie. So there you have it. Heavy Metal Massacre.
Funny, as I'm looking for Rock and Roll Hotel in my files, I'm coming across Rock and Roll Nightmare, and I'm just like, I'd rather watch that again, because I had to watch Rock and Roll Hotel twice. It's not worth a second viewing. I mean, there's probably going to be a couple people in Richmond who are really bad at us for saying that, but my God. I mean, you mentioned Mrs. Velteen, Ms. Velteen, the evil owner of the radio station. And she's got this whole like weird thing about her shoes, and there's this kind of like lesbian relationship with this woman who I guess works there, and then she just disappears. Like she is gone, and there's this whole character of this like fairy godmother who is a street person, and she gives Colin Quinn a motorcycle. She disappears. I mean, the whole movie just seems so thrown together.
Mother Dumpster.
Yes. We have no idea what the Rock and Roll Hotel is for most of the movie. We finally get there, and I still don't know what the hell it is. Because it seems like people don't age when you're in there, because Dick Shawn, the guy who was brilliant as Hitler in Springtime for Hitler and the original producers, he's there, and apparently he's been there from the 50s or something.
I mean, to me, it seems like a wax museum with a pulse, because when they're walking down the hallway, there's this guy that comes out and is like, hey, do you give me an E-string? And it's like, sure, I'll get you that. And then they're like talking amongst themselves. It's like, is that who I think it is? It's like, yeah. And it's a guy dressed up like Jimi Hendrix. So to me, it seems like a place where it's like either dead musicians go or, people who are like hiding out from the world or something. It's some sort of like witness protection program for musicians, I guess. I don't know.
It seems like you would have had just one more character, like maybe a Jim Morrison type or something that might have shown up. But yeah, even a Mama Cass, for God's sakes.
And then there's this one part that really kind of threw me off is she's in several parts of the film trying to get press and try to get attention. So she's on stage, she sings, she comes off stage and sits down at the table next to the journalist, and she's like, what are you writing? What are you writing about me? And she grabs his notebook or whatever, and it says, first was Janice, now there's Lisa. And then she starts making out with him. And I'm just like, you really shouldn't make out with journalists. That's not a good idea.
No, you don't know what they've got.
There's one big showstopper, though, that actually came off pretty well, I thought, considering, by comparison, which was late in the film. They pull out all the stops, and it's like Dick Shawn and the actress who plays his wife, who's apparently a real dancer, and they've got a whole backup, troupe of dancers in it, and I thought that one was actually really, pretty good. This was during the Battle of the Bands, portion of the film.
Oh yeah, it's the Carl Perkins song. The what was it? The Pink Pedal Pushers or something?
Yeah, that's the one. I thought that, I'm not big into musicals, but I thought that was a pretty professional number.
You can find a ruby in a mountain of rocks if you look hard enough, I suppose.
The only other quasi-compliment I'll extend about this fiasco is to Rachel Sweet, who could, assuming she did write these songs, I thought that she was able to make good ersatz numbers. Like there was the Madonna song, there was like a Cyndi Lauper song, a Joan Jett song. She was very good at kind of writing rip-off songs, so she could write a hook. So that's the only other thing I'll mention that's positive.
One other thing to add to the funeral pyre that is Rock and Roll Hotel. Apparently this movie was shot in 3D. In the credits there's all these things about like 3D, assistant to the director, 3D this, 3D that, and I'm just like, I didn't even see any like of those cheesy, guitar coming towards the camera, Mad Max Fury Road type things. It was just like all of a sudden, I didn't see people pointing spears or anything at the camera. It just, I don't know why this would have been in 3D, and I'm kind of hoping maybe like 3D actually stands for something else in these credits or something, but unfortunately I think this was 3D film.
Well, it was probably good for the marketing of the movie. They could, you say something like, not since Dial M for Murder has a 3D movie been so anticipated. I think I might be mistaken, but I think a lot of the 3D work was done in the projection booth, if I can use that expression, rather than in the production. I'm not really that certain, but that might have been what was going on there.
I just got to say that between Rock and Roll High School and the next film we're going to talk about, that it's amazing that black people haven't banded together and taken back rock and roll from white folks. It's just, they're so atrocious. It's such atrocity and, disrespect for the whole term rock and roll, that really if black folks were to come back and say, you've destroyed rock and roll and white folks, you don't deserve it anymore, I can understand.
It's amazing how things change over a period of 12 years. Between Rock and Roll High School, 1979, and then Rock and Roll High School Forever in 1991, what the hell happened to our country? Was it Ronald Reagan and George Bush? What happened? Because it's like Rock and Roll High School Forever is one of the biggest cinematic abortions that I've seen in a long time. And maybe had I seen it in even if I had seen it in 1991 as a 19-year-old, I still would have thought it was horrible. This movie, it just stinks on ice. Oh my God. And so much of it just lands squarely at the feet of the star, Corey Feldman. Wow. Corey Feldman has made some bad movies, but this definitely has to be ranked amongst the top of his bad movies.
They try to pick up where the first one left off, but they change so many elements and then keep so many elements that it's really bizarre. They should have just blew up the whole thing and started from zero. Because first off, the school, instead of being Vince Lombardi High, which, really wasn't a joke, it's like, whatever, it's Vince Lombardi High, becomes Ronald Reagan High. And then there's all of these sort of references to Reagan and the Reagan era and the yuppies and all of this stuff. But it all feels really flat. And then when you talk about Corey Feldman, it's like I knew kids who were into rock music at this time, and they did not like Michael Jackson. And there's all of this reference to like him walking around and doing like Michael Jackson moves that it's like, no. Like no self-respecting kid who was into rock music in the early 90s would have thought Michael Jackson was cool.
More than Corey Feldman, I said all the blame falls at his feet. I imagine that a lot of the blame goes over to Michael Jackson because in my mind, Corey Feldman was probably a victim of Michael Jackson and more than just being, diddled by Jackson. He kind of adopted. Yeah, you're right. All those, like the looks, the clothes, the hat, the dance moves. And I mean, if you want to see a white boy trying to dance like Michael Jackson, it is awkward. It is so awkward. And he just kind of like ingrains it into his personality. So when he does his little flips and dance moves and like his arms going out, it just looks so wrong. And he's got that nasty long hair in this film, because Corey Feldman, he could be a handsome guy, and he looks okay when his hair's pulled back, but when it is just kind of like, he kind of looks like Michael Hutchence from InXS a little bit, in all the wrong ways. And then he puts on that fucking fedora, man, and I just want to, like, you know, I can't stand it.
Yeah, you kind of hope he's going to tie a belt around his neck at a certain point.
Our friends over at We Hate Movies did this movie just a while back, and when they were describing it, I was like, there's no way it can be this bad, but it is that bad. In fact, I think it's actually worse seeing it than, you know, hearing these guys who can really take apart a bad movie and kind of put it back together. I mean, God help them for going through and watching this thing. I mean, one of the first problems that I have with the movies, we've got Larry Linville, known to most people, at least of my age, as Major Frank Burns. And he's in there at the beginning, and he's kind of in there at the end, but then he seems to be missing through most of it. And then you have Mary Woronov come over, and she takes over as Dr. Vader. She's not Evelyn Togar anymore. She's Dr. Vader, and she's missing a hand. So you have this fake hand that she's wearing, and it's not even clever like A Fistful of Chopsticks from Kentucky Fried Movie, where, you know, she's changing the hand to do different things. There's so few attempts at jokes. I mean, just so much of the film just seems so wrong-headed. Like, for just one example. So the kids are the band, the Eradicators, which always reminds me of the Kids in the Hall skit.
I am the Eradicator.
The Eradicators are going through the high school, and they're setting up all this kind of stuff, all these tripwires and cameras and all this kind of garbage. The soundtrack, for some reason, it's the theme from Hawaii Five-0. I would think maybe you want to use the theme from Mission Impossible or some sort of like spy thing. Instead, it's this jaunty Hawaii Five-0 theme. And I'm like, what the hell are you guys doing? That is just could you not get the rights? And if you couldn't get the rights, why are you using Hawaii Five-0?
The bits in Rock and Roll High School were very inspired. They were funny. They were cute. They were always inspired. The bits in this movie are hackneyed and lazy.
The only sort of production scene that I liked in here that I thought was pretty good is in the beginning. I mean, it first off sets the tone for you because Corey's doing this fourth wall breaking. He's talking to the camera. The staging and editing of the whole flushing scene, I thought was well done. Like, they spent a lot of time putting that together. Like, to get the camera on the tracks and cut it all together. It pays off okay. But the whole thing is I'm like, okay, the production value is okay there, and then everything sort of goes downhill, like quality-wise. And then if this is supposed to be like the worst thing ever, this band that Feldman has, they do really awful music. Like, they do these really bad covers that are not inspired. Like I could understand if they were like a metal band, you know, or a hardcore band or something, but they're not. They're doing like Tutti Frutti, like really bad version of it. Like I would rather listen to the Pat Boone version of that, which is fucking atrocious too. But it's like the whole concept, I guess, is that Reagan represents conformity. And that's what you get with these students who are like, oh, teacher, you know, the kids aren't taking it serious, and they're like the yuppies. But the problem is even the nonconformists are so conformed that they're not even interesting. Like, they're not really even rebels. Like, they're barely, like, rebellious. It's terrible.
Well, if you're going to steal all these ideas from Rock and Roll High School, one of them that you should probably do is bring in an outside band of note rather than having Corey Feldman's band be kind of the main protagonists of the film. And yeah, they're doing horrible, horrible covers. They're not threatening at all. So there's no reason why anybody should be like, oh my God, the Eradicators, this band is they're going to ruin our children's minds or whatever. There's just none of that because yeah, they're doing fucking Tutti Frutti. They're doing covers of old 50s songs. And then when they do something quote unquote original, it just sounds like a lame hard rock song from the late 80s. And it's like, again, we're not doing it. I would rather hear the Love at the Laundromat song. Personally, I felt that there was more to that, which was this other band that apparently we're supposed to hate because they have like synth stuff going on, but there's nothing punk rock about this movie at all. And it just, it kind of floors me just how bad it is. And you brought up the Reaganites, the yuppies and stuff. To me, it felt like rather than Rock and Roll High School that they were ripping off, where all of the kids were kind of in it together. I mean, other than Hansel and Gretel, you know, yeah, you've got the football players picking on the freshmen, this kind of stuff, but really they all kind of banded together. With these yuppies and stuff, I was totally reminded of Animal House with the, you know, the other frat and sorority, and you know, you've got, you know, the Delta House taking on the Rules and the Rules Lost, and here you've got the Eradicators kind of gently prodding the other people and not really doing a very good job at being funny about it or clever.
No. And in terms of the music, I mean, let's go back to another episode that we did, Black Roses. Like, one can understand, given that time, which is almost the same time as this, that band in Black Roses was more threatening than the band that's in this. Like, this is just I don't understand. Like, the only thing I can figure out is they blew all the money to get Corey Feldman, and they didn't have any money to either hire a band or pay for music rights. And therefore they had to do all these, like, you know, which I guess at that time would have been almost, you know, public domain. Or they would have been cheap songs to just get the rights to perform.
Remember when we talked about Trancers 2 and just the production values of Trancers 2, where it always felt like we're going to do a single shot of this actor and then we're going to cut it with a single shot of this actor. So basically it doesn't look like the two actors were even anywhere near them, you know, where it was just like, you know, was this actor even on set when you were on set, Tim Thomerson? You know, it just felt like this very, you know, disconnected way of shooting. I had that same kind of shooting thing with Rock and Roll High School Forever, where it was like, here's the rest of Corey's band and then here's Corey. And I'm just like, were you coming in on a different day to shoot these? And it just feels like every time they show him, it feels like they had just said action right before. And then he delivers his little quip or whatever. Cut, print. All right, now, Corey, we're going to do the next one. Action. You know, it's just like, it just felt like it was so pieced together. And there's something to be said about Eisensteinian montage, but this is not the time or the place for that.
I guess the verdict is just say no to Rock and Roll High School Forever. You know a movie is bad when its biggest strength is watching Rock and Roll Hotel afterward.
The whole thing is that they take set pieces and ideas from the first film and amp them a little bit. Now, first off, the idea that the Paul Bartel character, who's not played by Paul Bartel in here, would be the principal and kind of be, you know, that really didn't work for me. And then when Mary Woronov shows up to be the new principal, and it's like you said, they have this whole thing with her with the hand, which reminded me actually of Inspector Gadget, which would have been around this time or a little earlier, which is what I was watching with the claw or whatever, the guy, you know, that you never see his face. And of course, because in order to be a fascist, we got to borrow all that SS and Nazi stuff because that's not original. So there's all of this thing with her and her two minions who are dressed like SS stormtroopers. So I'm just like, God, it's like you guys don't have original idea in your head, do you?
Screamin' Steve character shows up again, or a guy who says his name is Screamin' Steve. This guy was so awful. I thought it was actually Dave Kendall playing him. Dave Kendall of MTV's 120 Minutes, who I just could never stand. And it's Richard Blade, who's now like a DJ on Sirius XM. And it's like, wow, if I had any sort of respect for you before, it is right out the window, because I know Screamin' Steve, sir, and you are no Screamin' Steve.
I'm trying to figure out what this whole thing with the fridge is.
What the fuck was that scene?
Okay, so there's a scene where Corey sees an ad in the paper for a fridge from the 60s. And for some reason, he's enamored with mid-century modern appliances, I guess. So they go to this lady's house, and they pretend to be like from the Church of the Refrigerator or something, and they do this big song and dance number around this thing in the basement and around the refrigerator. And I don't understand what that is even about. It doesn't make any sense.
No, and it's as far from funny as you can possibly get. And then them opening up their clothes and having household appliances and kitchen utensils, and then the old lady and the man just screaming their heads off. I'm like, what is going on? I mean, this felt like, Godard directed this scene. I was just like, what? I'm completely flummoxed by this.
And frankly, I was also very confused as to why Mary Woronov would have agreed to participate in this movie. She had done so many great turns in a number of classic cult films already. And then she ends up slumming it in this movie. I have no idea why she agreed to participate in this. It's confusing. Same with Larry Linville, who, like you said, was barely even in the movie. Larry Linville, what a great talent. He did some great work in MASH, like you mentioned, and here he's completely, utterly wasted.
No, and anybody who's like, oh, hey, it's a sequel to Rock and Roll High School, who's about to jump at that thing? Well, at least the writer-director of Rock and Roll High School, Deborah Brock, she would go on to be one of the co-producers of Buffalo 66. So we also have that to thank her for, too.
Not a big Gallo fan, eh?
I am not. Sorry. That's really the only thing on her CV. She did Slumber Party Massacre 2, Andy Colby's Incredible Adventure. She was the co-executive producer on Honey, I Blew Up the Kid. Associate producer on One Tough Bastard. And then, her last thing... Oh, I guess she was in one called Caught in the Headlights, or wrote one called Caught in the Headlights. Now I have to track down Andy Colby's Incredible Adventure.
No, you don't. You can live your whole life and not feel you got cheated. I haven't seen it, but I can tell you probably didn't get cheated.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
Let's come to our final kind of journey here on the riffing of Rock and Roll High School. There was a series in the 90s that Robert Rodriguez kind of put together with Showtime called Rebel Highway, and it was stories kind of taken from the 1950s. I've really only seen now 2 of them. I'm trying to think. I think the first one I saw was Rebel Rousers or Rebel Racers. Not to be confused with Rebel Rebel, which was actually the Hamburglar story.
Road Racers was the title. Racers. It was Robert Rodriguez cable film, yeah.
And was David Arquette in that? Am I remembering right?
I can't remember. I just remember the title, that's all.
Well, there was this one, which was called Shake, Rattle, and Rock from 1994, directed by Allan Arkush, so going back to the original director. And then we have Dey Young, Mary Woronov, PJ Soles, all returning in this film, and they are basically playing the same named characters, but they are obviously not the same characters, because this is set squarely in the 1950s. Also, Nora Dunn is there, and she's one of the 4 mothers that are in this film, and Nora Dunn is the mother of Renee Zellweger. This is Renee Zellweger when she didn't have that messed up face that she has now. She was, the cute Renee Zellweger. And she's a rock and roller, and she goes on this TV show that Howie Mandel hosts, and it's a dance show, and there's all this stuff about integration. There's this black band who wants to come on and be on the show, but unfortunately this show isn't integrated, but the host is kind of hip to it, and the only thing that really kind of shocked me about this was that it wasn't set in Baltimore.
Yeah, it really is Hairspray. And even the design and color scheme and everything, it did remind me a lot of Hairspray. The one thing that I liked about bringing back all of them who were in Rock and Roll High School and having them play the opposite is that you get the idea that maybe these were the mothers of, the the characters we get in Rock and Roll High School. It looks nice. I think it has some good ideas. But to me, like I said, I'm like, well, I'll just watch Hairspray, is what I kind of thought when I looked at it.
So I'm glad I wasn't the only one thinking Hairspray. Adam, were you also on the Hairspray tip?
Yeah, as I was watching it, there was something nagging at me about how there was something very familiar about this movie, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And then you mentioned Hairspray in an email or something like that, and I said, yes, that's what it is. A lot of similarities. And my thoughts about Renee Zellweger is I think she did a pretty good job in the movie in general, her acting and whatnot, and even her lip syncing was fine. It was the match of the voice that was just, for me, didn't work at all. I just thought it was really a mismatch. The voice and the physical person just didn't go together at all.
There's definitely some problems with that. I mean, because her speaking voice is very distinctive, and to have a singer who just sound well, I guess the best real world example I can give is it's like knowing that Gomer Pyle could sing like Jim Nabors. And to me, there was always that weird discrepancy, which was a real world thing. Apparently, he sang like Jim Nabors. He was Jim Nabors, but when he would get up there and start belting out the songs, I'm like, you got to be kidding me. There's no way that voice is coming from this guy.
This famous TV acting star is loved by countless millions as Gomer Pyle, but now he's also loved as America's romantic recording star. Jim Nabors has already won 4 Gold Record Awards, and now we proudly offer the most beautiful recordings ever made by Jim Nabors. And honey, I miss you. Yes, here is all the heart-touching magic of Jim Nabors in one exclusive collection.
The open, for me, was also another note back to John Waters, in that the opening credits in this, I was like, man, they should have did a nicer credit sequence in this. It just, the opening credits really kind of bothered me. What is Renee Zellweger in a room kind of running around and acting out like what the lyrics say in The Girl Can't Help It by Little Richard. The use of Girl Can't Help It will always be indelible in my mind, like Stuck in the Middle with You and Reservoir Dogs, or Singing in the Rain and Clockwork Orange. Girl Can't Help It that's in Pink Flamingos. And it will always be Divine walking through Baltimore and doing what Divine's doing in that scene. And when I heard that, I go, this is like, and then later when I was watching it with the whole thing with the integration and the TV show and all that stuff, I'm like, I don't know if he's trying to reference John Waters and Hairspray and all that stuff. I probably doubt it, but it just kind of really felt like it.
Arkush was definitely paying an homage to the those Frank Tashlin movies.
Well, it's funny. I didn't realize that there was a 1956 movie called Shake, Rattle, and Rock, which actually has a lot of these things that were in the Arkush version. This whole idea of, a group of concerned adults. I'm just reading from IMDb. Concerned adults try to ban rock and roll music from their town because they think that the music promotes juvenile delinquency. It's up to a radio disc jockey and a hipster to defend the music in a televised trial. The movie also features several rock and roll performances, most notably Fats Domino. I'm curious now to go back and watch the original Shake, Rattle, and Rock and see how much of that informs Hairspray, but I think that there was such a small period of time. I mean, 1956 when Shake, Rattle, and Rock comes out to 1994, and if it is a remake, it's an uncredited remake, unfortunately. And compare that 56 to 94 from 1988 to 94. That was the difference between Hairspray and the Shake, Rattle, and Rock by Arkush. It definitely was ringing much more true to that than to anything else, especially having your character on the television show and, the scene when the parents are going into in this case, it's a Chinese area. It's not a black area because they're playing at this old former Chinese restaurant. I mean, I was expecting one of them to get grabbed by Pia Zadora and Rick Ocasek or something. It was just like, it just was way too spot on. I mean, it was just like kind of, you could draw parallel lines between so much of the stuff that was happening in this. And really, to me, what was missing, though, was that whole, the self-identity. I mean, it was one thing for Renee Zellweger to want to be a rocker and stuff, but I liked that Ricki Lake was both the hair hopper and that she was a full-figured woman, and you had that whole idea of her kind of fighting on multiple fronts rather than just, I want to be a rock singer. And, she, the woman that gave her voice in the film had a good voice, but yeah, I totally agree with you, Adam. It wasn't necessarily the right voice for Zellweger.
I think that also the casting of Shake, Rattle, and Rock is pretty inspired. I think I was emailing with you, Mike, about it, and I mentioned that it kind of almost reminded me of an Allison Anders movie, or one of her earlier movies, with the casting John Doe, Ruth Brown's in this movie. So using musicians as actors is something she might do. So maybe it's like kind of a hybrid in a way of Allison Anders, Frank Tashlin, and John Waters or something. But it had its moments.
I was really glad to see Garrett Graham show up. I mean, it's kind of funny. I was watching Brian De Palma films all weekend long. So at one point I was like, where did I see Garrett Graham in that wasn't a Brian De Palma film? And then finally it dawned on me. I was like, oh, yeah, he was Lipsky in the Shake, Rattle, and Rock. I have to say, though, John Doe, I don't know how old the guy is, but, man, he looked way older than 21. I mean, that whole, like, we're talking about Rock and Roll High School. We don't care how old these kids are. Doesn't really matter. They are in their 20s and 30s, and they're playing these high school kids, yada, yada. But for some reason in Shake, Rattle, and Rock, it just really rubbed me the wrong way when I see Renee Zellweger, who looks one age, and then John Doe showing up as this 21-year-old. Just a little too much in this one. I don't know if you had anything to add about that, or if you wanted to talk about Paul Anka.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was what an unexpected but a cameo, Paul Anka. I don't think I've ever seen him in a movie before.
I've only seen him in The Lonely Boy, which was a documentary made about him years and years ago, which is hilarious to go back and watch now, because Paul Anka, 1963, the guy was on top of the world. I mean, he was just, girls weren't necessarily throwing their underwear at him, at least in this documentary, but they were just all over him, and he was just, right there. And then you think about it like, oh, yeah, the Beatles are coming. Like within 3 months or whenever this movie came out, he would be completely unseated by the Beatles, by the British invasion. And yeah, Paul Anka was still relevant and a pop star and everything for a long time, but he was not going to be the king of the world that he was. But it is a great, great documentary.
Well, I fully expected him to come back in the movie, and he never does reappear.
I must have blinked and I missed him. Where was he in this?
Oh, he comes in sort of early in the beginning when he's delivering, or he's maybe running a restaurant or something nearby, and they're all out on the street, and he's like trying to chase away some of the kids or something like that. He tries to. He's definitely racist and narrow-minded.
Oh, that guy. Yeah. Okay. All right. That she calls him like a Nazi pig or something.
That's right.
I totally did not peg him as Paul Anka.
Such a good cameo. It's an anti-cameo.
The one cameo that really bothered me, though, was seeing fucking Ricky Rackman show up as Eddie Cochran. I don't know if you guys ever suffered through the Headbangers Ball on MTV, but Ricky Rackman, I mean, I mentioned Dave Kendall before. Ricky Rackman was the biggest piece of shit that was on MTV for at least a decade, and I just could not fucking stand that guy.
Ouch.
Sorry.
We have our lines in the sand. But what seemed to be a line in the sand for you were saying earlier, was John Doe. Now, I like John Doe in here, but I got to agree with you. I think I think he's a bit too old to play 21.
I think actually it would have been better had they switched and had Mojo Nixon be the juvenile delinquent in this movie and have John Doe be the spirit of rock and roll in Rock and Roll High School Forever. Because, man, Mojo definitely has looks a little bit younger, and it could just be the 3 years age difference between the two films. But I like Mojo Nixon, but I just felt ashamed when he showed up in Rock and Roll High School Forever. And I'm sorry that I'm still bashing that film, but it really bothered me, man. I think I'm going to need to talk to my therapist about this.
Please do.
I would rather watch Rock and Roll Hotel any day of the week than watch Rock and Roll High School Forever. One of the worst things is that it has the words Rock and Roll High School in the title, and then they go and they just piss all over this movie that I like.
Oh, I just feel sad that Mary Woronov, who did participate in it, I think it's like a blemish on her record.
I'd rather shove 18-inch sewing needles into my eyes than watch any of these again, besides Rock and Roll High School.
Rock and Roll High School, I could watch it again right now, tomorrow, the day after. The more times I watch the movie, the more I actually like it. And I'm glad that you watch it so many times for the show, Adam, and kind of, got with the program a little bit here.
Oh, I totally did. Thank you for with this, my connection, of course, was Forest Hills with the Ramones, but I really feel like it's been terrific getting close to that film. And I feel like my main problem with rock and roll, I have to remember now the title, with Shake, Rattle, and Rock is its lack of camp. I think, again, it's so Rock and Roll High School has this, it's just sort of sense of elan and the campiness and the jokes and the bits that it's like Shake, Rattle, and Rock. Am I getting that right? Yeah.
Yep.
It sort of just lacks the sort of, even though it's directed by Allan Arkush and it brings back actors like, Mary Woronov, P.J. Souls, and Dick Miller. But it just lacks the campiness of that terrific film that we're, paying homage to today.
So let's go ahead and take a break and play a preview for next week's show.
Hey, get in. I'm taking you home with me. Well, what are you waiting for? You want a piggyback ride? Don't get the wrong idea about me, Carly. We just met.
I don't have any ideas yet. We could do it, Faye. And I could take care of you real good.
And suddenly I saw you two on the dance floor, and it hit me like one of the kids' left hooks here. That's what they used to call him, Kid Collins.
You don't really know anything about me.
Oh, but I know people. I know what they'll do, and I know what they won't do.
But I don't want him talking you into this mess.
They're using you for their own criminal purposes.
I'd say it'd be good if you never had to worry about money the rest of your life.
Maybe I can get some kind of job.
Don't hurt me, mister.
I don't know another guy in this country pulls a stunt like that and gets away with it.
Oh.
How about it? And it's a damn good thing we were there. You would have taken the wrong boy.
I told you, Faye, right from the beginning that I wasn't stupid.
Family's ready to pay up. They just want their boy back.
Wake up, Collie.
Faye doesn't trust me, and I don't trust her. We both don't trust you, but I can fix that part. You. We can end all this right now.
You and me, together forever.
And I could take care of you real good.
You really believe there could be a you and me?
That's right. We're back next week with a bit of a summer neo-noir with After Dark, My Sweet, an episode to feature the first half of our two-part interview with director James Foley. But before we go, I want to thank all of our guests on this week's episode. Remember, there are bonus interviews for a lot of the folks, and you can go to our website, projection-booth.com, to hear those. And I also want to thank our special guest co-host, Adam Schartoff. And Adam, for folks who may not know, tell us a little bit about what Filmwax Radio is all about, sir.
Well, I interview people from all over the film world, primarily independent film, art films. So it's an interview format, and I bring on people. I've had on Brian De Palma. And
we haven't even talked to Brian De Palma, goddammit.
I'll see what I can do. Thank you, guys. Right, Mike, you hooked me up at one point because of Tulane Blacktop.
Yeah, a little Monty Hellman connection there.
Definitely. So I appreciate that. I just had on very obscure filmmakers from the independent film world more often than not.
Well, obscure filmmakers that hopefully won't be that obscure any longer.
No, they're wonderful. Everybody's wonderful, and I also have like people from the industry side, and pretty much anybody with a stake in the game. And you can go to filmwaxradio.com and get all things Filmwax. You can find all things Filmwax there.
So what are some of your upcoming episodes you have?
Well, actually, I do have Andrew Bajowski and Kevin Corrigan coming up. Cross your fingers. I'm supposed to be talking with Jason Schwartzman also. So not everybody is quite so obscure.
Cool. Well, hey, thanks again, Anna, for coming on the show. And thanks for everybody for listening. If you've enjoyed the show, go on over to iTunes, leave us a review, give us some stars, share the episode on your social media, write about us on your Trapper Keeper, tattoo us on your arm, whatever it takes to kind of get the word out. But now, gentlemen, class dismissed.
This is the big time, girlie. This is rock and roll.
Yeah, well, this rock and roll high school.
Rock and roll high school?
Yeah, I wrote it for Mr. McGree's music class, but I really wrote it for you, Joey.
Hey, pizza! Great, let's dig in. Yeah, I want some.
Oh, thanks!
How many times do I have to tell you? No pizza for you, Joey. More beef German, riboflavin. Yeah, come on, Joey, eat good. See, I'm going to eat some myself, too. Organic alfalfa sprouts. Come on, Joey. Hey. Good. Come on, eat, Joey. Good boy. Yeah, Mama, I'll love you. You like it, huh? Huh? Good, yeah. Iron, niacin, B12. Rose in the earth.
If you enjoy this show and want more people to know about it, head on over to iTunes, leave a comment, and rate it 5 stars. Make sure you like and share us on Facebook, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter. Just search for Christopher Media. Thank you in advance for supporting Christopher Media by clicking on the PayPal button and by clicking through to all the sponsors who support ChristopherMedia.net. Most importantly, we would like to take the time to extend an extra special thanks to you. Christopher Media could not exist without your support. Thank you for visiting ChristopherMedia.net, and thank you for listening. Christopher Media. Let's make some noise.